Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this. Just read out the short notice beforehand. As this is being run as a hybrid meeting, please can I remind those participating via Microsoft Teams to only switch their camera and microphone on when asked to by myself to address the committee and off at all other times. So thank you. So moving on, start with 46 with apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Received apology today from councillors Chris Johnson and Gregor Murray, and councillors Adrian Mather and Michael Firmager are substituting this evening.
Thank you. Do you have any public questions?
No public or member questions, Chair.
Okay. Right, so we'll jump on to the main body of this evening, the medium-term financial plan place and growth directorate. Sorry, there were no member questions. Okay, so moving off, who would like to, just before, just to say, we've got Lindsay Ferris on the call here. He's requested that we finish with his bits by 8 o'clock so he can go. So he's got a couple of items on this agenda, but I just want to make sure that no one has any issues with that. No?
It might be worth doing Sarah Kerr as well.
Can't see her, that she's, oh, hi Sarah.
She's online, yeah.
Sarah's got 2 on here as well, so that's fine. Pauline?
One of the comments in here says that they're going to answer some of the questions about staff numbers, fixed term contracts, at this meeting, but they aren't in the pack. I presume that will still be by directorate, but we don't need the exec members for that. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That particular question states in the pack that it will be coming to corporate overview and scrutiny. However, subsequent to that, it's come to my attention that Personnel Board have requested the same information, and therefore it's been pulled together for the Personnel Board. It's not an easy piece of work, so and we only want one version of the truth. So as soon as that is available for presentation to Personnel Board, it will be shared with the members here.
Do you have a timescale?
I'm not doing the piece of work directly, so it wouldn't be fair for me to say, but I'll go back and check out. Like I say, I don't think it's not anywhere near as straightforward as we would like, being the nature of the ask, but I'll come back and give a timescale to it.
Okay. Pauline?
I'm sure that will be fine as long as it's this side of Christmas, but the Personnel Board only asked for a subset of the information that was asked for by this committee, so can we be assured that we'll get all of it?
My understanding of the ask through Personnel Board was the agency, the contractors, interims. I can't think of any other subset within that category that falls outside the standard employee cost.
So what I was asking for, which you said you would give me either in this process or through Personnel Board, and that's fine, was also fixed term contracts that translated into people, as opposed to fixed term contracts that translate into bridges or whatever. But you know, you might have a contract with a business which provides a person, and I'd like to know where people are on the sort of are under IR35 essentially, contract and are a fixed term contract. I don't want them to disappear. So that's the bit the Personnel Board I don't think asked for. If that's going to be in there, that's fine.
Yeah, so this would be, did you say outside of IR35? Yes, these would be picked up, correct, as contractors that are outside of IR35 occupying vacancies or otherwise.
Okay, what I'm going to say here, can we make sure this is down as an action for us to capture so that it is covered, and it has to be done before Christmas because of the budgetary process. So yeah, that'll be good. I know there are some items in here tonight where there are talking about some staffing levels, so I do think it is appropriate to ask questions on those particular items. Okay. Before we move on, I actually missed out one section, which is declaration of interest. So has anybody got a declaration of interest? Nope, good. Right, so again, I'll just reiterate, with Lindsay's and Sarah's bits, if we cover those before 8 o'clock, then we'll go on to the rest of everybody else's. No objection to that. Okay, moving on.
Yes, okay. Well, this meeting is about examining part of our budget for next year. And at the moment, for years 23-24, we need to bridge a huge gap across the council of a 4 million shortfall in revenue and a 14 million shortfall in proposed capital projects. This is where we need your help as a scrutiny committee to question our leads and officers to ensure that we are making the maximum savings and revenue generation across the organisation. We also need to prioritise capital projects such that they stay within our budget. Where this is not going to be enough, we need to know what else we should prioritise and where else we should look to keep within our means. We're still recovering from the pandemic, and there is now no longer any COVID-related financial support from central government. Our reserves have been depleted at a time when we are also all having to battle heavy increases in inflation across all areas of the council. And I'm afraid that inflation problems that are affecting our residents are also affecting the council just as much, if not more, as we do not have a protection of a cap on energy costs which the residents currently have. We are also limited in that we can only raise our council tax by 1.99% per year, which I think we can all agree is woefully inadequate in today's Britain. Our only other methods of raising revenue is by cutting spending, services and increasing charges. Tonight, we're looking at the Place and Growth Directorate. This includes many things such as highways, car parking, waste collection, planning, environmental health, park maintenance and many, many more things. Unfortunately, Steve Moore, our Director of Place and Growth, is unwell and cannot be here. But we have representation from our officers in their respective teams, along with the exec members for this area. As councillors, you will know that most of our funding is spent on adult social care and children's services, most of which is statutory. Place and Growth does have some statutory requirements, but it's an area that probably has the most scope for savings and improvements, even if we don't like the idea of that. I urge you to explore where more savings can be made and to particularly question the growth bids. We need to be limiting our growth to only expanding in areas that are essential statutory, or are likely to generate revenue. Anything else should be looked very carefully and reprioritised. We must present a balanced budget in February at February's budget meeting, and we'll have no choice but to do so. So this scrutiny process is vital to helping make those decisions on what is necessary. Thank you. And I'll hand it to Graham, I think, at this point.
Before you go on, I think Pauline, did you have a point?
Just a couple of questions, actually. Thank you, Imogen. You said you could only increase council tax by 1.99%. Are we also allowed to increase the adult social care precept? And if so, by how much?
Yes.
At the last overview and scrutiny, where we showed the summary, so it's in the public domain, you can refer back to it. We showed an assumption of 1.99% on council tax and 1% adult social care precept, and that is set out in that table.
So we're allowed to increase council tax by 2.99%, not 1.99%. It's just some of it's ring fenced.
At the moment, we don't know what we're permitted to do, but for budgeting assumptions, we've assumed we would get an additional 1% for adult social care. Obviously, adult social care is a highly challenging area and may have a completely different solution to it.
And the second question was, you said you've got a 43 million capital gap at the moment?
14.
14.
14.
Yeah.
Makes it slightly better. And what have you, presumably you've assumed in the interest impact of capital on revenue, you've assumed that you will bridge that gap, have you?
No, the papers showed at last committee showed that we had a £14 million capital challenge and a £4 million revenue challenge. The working assumption is that we will, by levering in additional income, reprofiling schemes to later years or curtailing schemes, will balance that budget to zero.
And that's what we need to be looking at.
To be clear, that's the impact of capital on revenue that you've put in the budget.
We have not assumed that we will be borrowing an additional 14 million to bridge that, and therefore all those other measures I described would be enacted.
Capital obviously comes from borrowing and grants, mainly, still money as well. Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
I was saying that if you have more capital spend, you've got to pay interest on it, which comes out of the revenue account.
Yes.
What have you assumed in the revenue account? I do know that.
So if you borrow more, of course, it comes from revenue.
Okay, carry on, Graham.
Okay. Okay, just, I mean, Neil, you've got the buttons, thank you. I'll close that then. Okay, well, starting with page 5 of the agenda is the short introduction to this session. Members that were present last time will remember we went through the overall summary position faced by the council, and we've already talked around that, the 14 million capital challenge still there based on these bids, and the revenue 4 million challenge still there based on these bids. What I would like to stress is that we have to kind of put a line in the sand at certain points in time. So we produced a summary, and the figures that we're giving you are in line with that summary. If there's any change, we've stated, and of course there's the opportunity of, as we go through, to say this is the work that's going on, this might change this way or the other. Regardless, all of the changes from what I call lockdown 1, that summary version, will be brought back to this committee at the latter stages, so you can see how things have moved from A to B. And obviously there has to be movement from A to B because we have to balance both our revenue and capital budget. So no change is not an option. So this is the first in terms of the more detailed set proposals, and we start with place and growth. We'll then 3rd of November move to chief execs and resource and assets and organisational foundations, and then children's and adult social care. That will be the complete suite of the detail. Okay, next slide. Okay, as set out in the previous meeting, we're going to take all of the revenue, which includes ongoing growth, ongoing savings, special items, which tend to be one-off in nature, and capital. And as Imogen says, we've got the various, most importantly, the lead members here to highlight key areas in their section of the bids. Of course, the paperwork has been there for you to consider prior to this meeting. So most importantly, I think it will be to create space for you to ask your questions and us to be able to respond. So when I hand over to a lead member, it will be for a very brief account of their section. And then more importantly, we move to the question stage, and we'll take them member by member, but I understand, of course, we'll have to go out of sync and go to Lindsay's first if he has to go, and then Sarah's next if Sarah has to go. Okay, so this picks up the issues that you raised at the last committee, and we've introduced the overall departmental budget as you requested, and that was fairly simple to do. We've got a slide to follow on inflation that sets out inflation as requested. That was the ask, current spend on agency, consultancy, to be concluded in the corporate ONS presentation, which will now be given to you through the personnel board work. Calculation of whether the average new house being built in the borough broke even in terms of the service provided. So I've worked out using 22-23 MTFP, that 1.5% increase in the tax base generates £1,886,000. That was in the pack. I've done the calculation on 1.5% increase in the average population, and that comes to £2,272,000. That was the calculation requested and supplied.
Pauline. Norman, sorry.
Just on that, Graham, with the increase in the average population, that's in number of people, not households. Just trying to get the difference. The increase in the tax base is households, presumably. And then the population is calculated on the same basis as what I'm driving at. Because there's a gap here, and it's just whether it's all apples and apples or.
It's completely apples and apples, and I can show this in an infinite amount of ways. But at the end of the day is this: the tax base is the council's budget requirement. The council's budget requirement is taking into account the net expenditure minus the government grant equals the budget requirement times 1.5%. However one wants to describe an average household or an average person, it'll amount to the same thing. But it's 1.5% on the net cost before the reduction of the government grant. It's a very simple. So basically, if you look at it, I wish I would have shown you now, but the MTFP has all lines that arises at the net cost of services. That is the figure, whether you put it into an average household and times, or into an average create an average person and times. At the end of the day, that figure goes up by 1.5%. Then we take off government grant, say 16 million, which is the retained business rates, gives us a lower figure. That's the net budget requirement, and it's the net budget requirement obviously falls on the tax base, and therefore is the multiplier for the 1.5%. So you're always, unless we got zero government grant, and up to the point we get zero government grant, you will always find that the cost is higher than the income line. The only difference between the two is government grant, new homes bonus, government grant. And I think that was why I was, at the time I was struggling with the question. But it will always be your net expenditure, which is before government grant, will always be higher. Multiply that by 1% or 5%. Take the government grant off, and now you've got your tax-based calculation, which is your net budget requirement. So there's always the difference between the net cost and the budget requirement.
Okay, I'm going to say, David, did you have a question?
Yeah, Graham, you have to give me, this will be one of very many idiot questions. But in summary, you're saying the more the population grows, the poorer we get.
Whilst the government grant remains fixed, yes. Well, it has for the last 3 years. The best way to describe the government grant, because it comes in all sorts of guises, is to use the terminology settlement funding assessment. And if you look in the CFO report going back to 1920, I believe, it might be 2021, we've received £14.1 million as our SFA, settlement funding assessment, which equates to about £80 per head of population. Obviously, when this started, it was about £85 per head of population. Because of population rise, it's now £81.6 per head of population. So you're absolutely right.
Okay, what I'm going to do is, because we've got a lot to get through, is I think we'll park that one, because it is an interesting figure of 400,000 net loss effectively. So I think that's interesting, but let's move on.
Yeah. Okay, the other question I was asked to come back on was the delivery on the capital programme. This is the profile capital programme. So just so people are aware, if we were going to build a school that goes over 2 years, you wouldn't ask for a part of the school in 1 year and a part of school in the other year. You'd ask for 35 million or whatever school costs. Then realise it's going to span over 2 years, so you reprofile it over 2 years in terms of how much you expect in year 1 and year 2. therefore, this is the delivery at more or less 70% seems to be about our average in terms of delivering on that reprofile budget, which means the other 30% was intended to be spent in year one, but was not delivered in year one. It was therefore carried forward.
Do you accrue that? Do you accrue anything, or do you only, what do you accrue? I can't remember
well,
from audit committee.
If I understand the question right, those schemes that are already committed are reported to executive, but there's no choice to stop them because they're committed. You can't half build a school, for example. But any schemes where there's no commitment are listed as such, so that there's a genuine choice to make a different decision about progressing on that scheme.
So if you've committed it, you account for it at the point it's committed, or accrue the cash to pay it, but it goes in the year that it's committed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in many cases, there is no cash because we only borrow at the point of need. So if it's not spent, we wouldn't have taken the action to create the expenditure. Correct.
Just one other thing. What's happening with new homes bonus?
Well, I'm reporting that back to corporate ONS because that's what I said I would do. But in terms of what's happening to it, I don't know is the answer. But we have been factoring in a reduction over a period of time. There has been a lot of conjecture around that disappearing altogether. I have identified that in the summary slides as a risk in terms of our local government finance settlement. It is possible that that scheme could stop, could cease altogether, or turn into something else, or could ease down a bit further. I'm hoping that it, in the rhetoric of we're looking to roll over the settlement, that's the rhetoric I've heard today, that stays intact, but there is a risk, and I've flagged that as a risk for a while. I don't know the answer, but I've flagged it and tried to reduce our dependency on it.
Okay,
Thank you. Is that in these figures or not?
No, it will be in, if you go to your ONS pack for corporate and chief executives, you'll find it.
Can I change it because we're last question then?
So is it in the tax base that you said? Is that what's bridging the difference between 2.2 and 1.8 in there?
A part of it is. Most significantly, it's our retained business rates, which is 14 to 16 million.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, sorry. Here's the challenges that we listed last time, and just to show we listened to you again, we've added the risk of refugees into that. Next slide. Oh, look, there you are. Oh, challenges, new homes bonus count. Sorry, if you flick back, there you are. New homes bonus under the challenges as we discussed. This was the request of the breakdown of inflation. There it is. Although it's a very sizable figure, so that's 9 million we have to accommodate, it is still extremely challenging, particularly that contracts line of 2.2 million, and indeed the adult social care, which translates to about 3%, to keep within those inflationary pressures will be a big ask of this organisation right across the piece.
To be clear, is that just price inflation, not volume inflation? So
This is price.
Price inflation. Is that pension number realistic?
Yes. Okay, next slide. Right, we're now moving into the detail now, or the crux of it in many ways. And just as we go into this, just to remind ourselves, this is really, really tough. The more we take savings out, the bigger the gap becomes. The more we put growth in, the bigger the gap becomes. So even with all these proposals in front of you and those that will follow, we still have a 4 million gap that we have to bridge to set a balanced budget. So that's a really important context for us all. And we'll now move through. Here you are. Here's the overall summary position with the total expenditure and income on place and growth. And then it's shown broken down into savings and growth over the 3 years. And now, next page. This is the revenue bids. So I think, do we now go searching for Lindsay's and Sarah's? So
Yeah.
so on that page, if we can just move on.
Lindsay's is on page 51.
So that's the business case. I'm on the third page of the revenue bids.
Next
That one. Yes,
There
I've
we
got
go.
2 on there. Additional consultancy budget for the local plan and development management staff costs. I have two lines there in that on that page. One for no, it's not on that. I've got 175,000 for additional consultancy budget.
Sorry, Lindsay, I'll just say if you want the detail of the report, it's on
Oh, I've
page
got revenue
51.
bid special items.
Oh, Lindsay's on special items. Lindsay, could you call out what's the page number for this?
Graham, am I correct?
I think it's 17. One of my.
Can I
Right,
make
I
a
think-
suggestion? So can I make a suggestion? We've got savings, we've got growth bids, and we've got special items. So why don't, I've got a growth and I've got a special item. It sounds like Lindsay's got one. So why don't we do the growth bids for Lindsay and I, and then do the special items for Lindsay and I? Do it in that order. Is that okay?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we want to go to, so we
Okay, page 7.
Yeah, I've got a one on revenue bids growth. There's a line which says local plan, salary, budget, pension costs, which is 19,000, which is in the middle there.
What's the details slide?
Oh, detail slide is page 51, which has got the actual
Yeah,
detail slide.
51.
Yeah.
Page 51. It's
correct.
actually got the revenue budget setting, place and growth, business case details.
Yeah, the business cases, one's on 51 and one's on 52.
Chairman, I think that there's a bit of confusion here. Not all of these have detailed business cases attached to them, and that's explained in the opening report. We've tried to produce the detailed templates where there is a certain magnitude in revenue and capital so that we're focused in detail on those. That doesn't stop you asking questions, but I'll just say don't go looking for the business case bid because there won't be one for that reason. So I think if we just use and the reference, so if we take the first one here, we've got Lindsay Ferris, the local plan salary budget. It's a very small figure, so I wouldn't expect Lindsay to have a lot to say about that. And then we've got Sarah, who's got a more substantial item with PGR 27, and that's the reference of the detailed bid.
Yeah, my apologies, everyone. Really, what I was looking at was the detail that we had here, which is more interesting than just the line item. And I was actually going to say, let's go through the detail that's here as opposed to the table entry. Because if we spend a lot of time on 19K and not look at 450K, we're wasting our time. So what I was saying is for Lindsay's efforts, let's go to the detail, which is page 51, and then his following one is on page 52, which then mirrors with the line items on page 17. And then we do the same thing with Sarah. That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah. So Graham, just one thing before you start. Just to be clear, if I've got a figure which is 19 grand in 23-24 and also 19 grand in 24-25 and 19 grand in 25-26, that is just one increase of 19,000. It's not. It's 19,000 a year for 3 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So it's like an ongoing salary. You recruit someone 19k and they stay around for 3 years.
Yes, because the 19 grand is below the threshold for the production of a business case details. So if we go to page 51, which is Lindsay's one, and go through that case. Thank you.
Yes, the one on page 51 is for the additional consultancy budget for the local plan, which is £175,000. And the majority of that is in this, in fact, I think it's all this year, 23-4. And that is because we are getting to the stage where a lot more activity to get us through to both Reg 19 and through to the final stages of a local plan are coming into play. And we have also just recruited a KC, as I need to call them now, instead of QC, a King's Counsel, to provide some assistance on the legal side associated with the local plan. And of course, there's going to be extra work from officers associated with putting an assessment of various sites that we're looking at, because we're having a review of the various sites at the moment to see what whether any of them are suitable or not. And that's the reason why there's a growth in the 23-4 figure. And if anyone wants to say anything further on the other one, which is on page...
Can I ask you a question,
Lindsay? Paulie's going to ask a question.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you, Lindsay. When it says additional consultancy, what's the baseline that this is additional to?
I'm afraid I don't know the baseline. We've got Ian Bellinger, we've got Ian Church, we've got about 4 or 5 members of staff working on the local plan. They work on other things as well, but that's the core. And I think we're now getting a lot more activity coming to look at the various sites. So we're actually getting into what I call the busy stage for the local plan. So we've got Ian Bellinger, we've got Ian Church, we've got a lady whose name escapes me for the moment, who's working on various things, some of which is funded by the developers and some of it which we have to pay ourselves. And then there's Trevor Saunders as well.
Lindsay, Graham's going to make a point here.
It's a general point, but leads to the specific. At the last meeting, you asked me to come back with the total budget for the activity, and they have been included. So you see page 51. So it says a total budget for the activity, which might partially or in full. It doesn't. All right. Well, it might answer future questions. Okay. Page 51. First box under financial information. Oh, it does. Good. So that was asked at last meeting and we've provided that. What I would say, please take this with a bit of caution because it's open to interpretation about what a budget for an activity is. Just simply explain. I could ask you if you were increasing car parking charges, for example, then, and I said, what's the budget for the activity? Someone may choose to take the gross income or may take the net income of the activity. I'm just saying there's interpretation about how it's expressed, but we have tried to embrace the desire, which is you want to see what the change is, the magnitude of change against the full budget. Thanks.
Shirley.
Sorry, Can I just clarify? So this total budget for the activity, 585,000. That's is that the total activity for producing our local plan update? Or is that the total budget for consultancy for producing the local plan update? Sorry to be pedantic.
It will be in the particular year 22-23, so it wouldn't be the whole cost over the lifetime.
Right.
It's a year snapshot, I would suggest.
Okay.
22-23.
Trevor, I see you've got your camera on. Do you have a comment on that?
Just that Graham's accurately explained it. There is a drawdown pot members to assist us in future years, but Graham's expressed it absolutely on the nail in terms of next year.
Thank you. David.
Without going into the detail of the whole local plan process, there's clearly sort of question marks over which way it may go, from a rewrite of what was kind of there to a completely fundamental overhaul involving another round of consultation. Which is assumed in this budget increase? Is this the kind of worst case scenario?
It is for next year, David, yes.
Let's just repeat that. This is the worst case scenario for next year.
Correct.
Do you have any more questions on this particular item? Looks like not. Okay, moving on to page 52, which is again Lindsay. That's the development management staffing costs.
Yes, this is to cover work associated with additional planning appeals, because they, after a period of COVID where nothing happened, we're getting a whole series of planning appeals coming through the system, and it is projected that that will continue. So we need to have resource to cover that. And we're looking at the enforcement area, where we're looking at an area that we need to be better at doing that. If Trevor might or Graham may have the specific details of what we're going to do there. And I'm not sure whether this falls into the issue that Pauline raised earlier about staffing issues, because it's looking about potentially having additional staff.
If it would be helpful, members, to clarify, it's a special item that runs over 3 years, which reduces to take account of the costs of some posts which were put into place in a couple of years. The intention is to reduce our need for budget over those 3 years with additional income coming in. But the staff are in place and have been in place for a year or so, dealing, as Councillor Ferris says, with the increase in enforcement work and appeal work that is currently ongoing, and that's not likely to change, as Councillor Ferris says, in the next couple of years.
Okay, questions? I do have one. What does CIC mean?
Where's that?
Okay, that was just explained to me.
Shall we check for other people's benefits?
Yes.
Yeah. There used to be a department called CIC, which ended a year or so ago, and therefore some of the work was activities were distributed around the organisation. So it's just transfers between departments.
Thank you. One other question with regards to the larger developments and dealing with developers and encourage them to get things right. Is that covered by this department? When I'm talking about getting the highways right, getting the infrastructure right, making sure they've actually done the right plan, they've adhered to the planning stuff.
Chairman, if I may, the budget covers what I call business as usual planning enforcement work. There's quite a caseload at the moment. It also indirectly covers some compliance work on major new developments as well. But it doesn't specifically look at highway matters of highways enforcement, etc., unless they are directly associated with the compliance of conditions or clauses in Section 106 agreements that are part of any planning permission.
Okay, thank you. Norman.
Right. I just want to understand the staffing sort of implications here. It seems that you've got two, as the text says, you've got 2 additional senior professional staff and 2 additional enforcement officers appointed through previous supplementary estimates. So I'm assuming that this sort of growth item, in a sense, is because you want to retain these people for longer than was previously intended, and to also take on extra staff for a short period. Is that right, or am I misunderstanding?
It's not for staff, it's for the retention of existing staff. My understanding is that the original special item was for a defined period of time, but it was impossible to recruit staff to those areas to undertake the additional work on a temporary basis. There was a great deal of difficulty in finding professional planning, transport engineers and building control staff, and has been for a little while. So the decision was made to make those staff permanent establishment posts, mindful that the division needs to work a way to weaning staff off the cost of those staff over a period of time, which is why, as I said earlier, it goes down over 3 years with intent to fill the cost with additional income.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions on this item? David and then Michael.
Not sure I might be repeating Norman's question, but bear with me. So the item enables the retention of 2 additional senior staff and enforcement officers, but the impact of not going ahead means that we're reducing the team by 5 to 6 posts. I don't quite understand that.
That's correct. If you were not to agree the special item, we would have redundancies in post to that level.
Why the difference in numbers?
Across the 3 years.
You're breaking up, Chairman.
So I'll rephrase the question. If you can bear with me, please, sure. But in the business case, it says the special item enables retention of 2 additional senior professional staff and 2 additional enforcement officers. That's 4.
Mm-hmm.
But then we go down a couple of boxes to impact and not successful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Right, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I might be asking the same sort of thing because I'm finding it's quite difficult to find my way through this, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's saying in here that we've no longer got a 5-year land supply, the appeals will go up. Have we got an adequate number of staff? And are we looking to recruit any more? Because I'm not I think probably finishing a little bit on David's point. I don't know if we're kind of saying the same sort of thing in an actual different way, because I'm really confused.
Chairman, we have currently got an adequate number of staff. The issue is that not that the totality of our existing staff complement is not funded in the next 3 years. So we are applying for a special item to cover that off over the 3 years, but with the intent that our reliance on additional base budget is reduced by generating additional income through the development management service, and also within that period of 3 years, if the government is good on its intent to increase planning fees for statutory planning applications, that will help bring in additional expenditure that we would expect for retaining those posts reduces over those 3 years. If a level of income doesn't come in as we expect and as we're currently estimating, we may need to come back in a future budget round with a revised set of figures. But the figures we have over the next 3 years in this item are based on best estimates at the current time.
Very quickly, Michael, then.
I'll be very brief. Yeah, I sort of only got half of that because it kept cutting out, but presumably the level of appeals are going to go up. Are we still certain we've got enough staff to deal with that on a worst case scenario?
Yes.
Pauline.
Sorry, just to follow on that, I'm probably being stupid here, but if we have enough staff already, then why aren't they covered by the 2.358 million that's in the total budget for activity for 22-23? How are they being paid for at the moment?
My understanding is they're being paid for at the moment by drawdowns from existing special item pots, which come to an end in the next financial year.
Okay, any other questions on this item? Looks like no. Okay, so that's completed Lindsay's bit. So thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you very much, much appreciated.
Okay, we'll move on to Sarah's items. Again, going through the reports, this is page 49. Starts as entitled the Domestic Abuse Commission Services.
Yeah, so this is currently in the growth area, but actually we're more likely to put this into a special item. So what's happening is we've got really, really high levels of victim survivors coming forward for support through our commission service, to the point that we're actually at unsafe caseloads. Which obviously then increases the risk of homicide, unfortunately. So we've put in a bid for some more money so that we can put more people into that team. The reason why we're talking about putting it into a special item is so that we are going to be applying for grant funding for this. We have already applied, not successfully so far, but we need to keep trying for these things, because with the Domestic Abuse Act that came in and the statutory powers that are given to us, unfortunately at the moment there's not enough funding for the level of demand. That's exacerbated by the fact that children are now seen as victims in their own right, but there was no money associated with that, unfortunately. So it's basically to fill a gap and make sure that we're keeping people safe.
Laura.
Thank you, Sarah. The 75,000 will go to employ more staff members. How many staff members will that employ? And will that bring it down to 30 cases per domestic violence specialist?
I believe that's 2 members of staff, but Fran might want to confirm that, who I believe is on the call.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so it's for an additional 2 members of staff, and it will bring down the case numbers to the safe level. At the moment, what we're seeing is, well, within the contract with the provider, the figure is for 85 caseloads each quarter. At the moment, we're significantly higher than that figure, which, as you allude to already, is an unsafe figure, and therefore this growth bid will allow for 2 additional members of staff that the provider can bring in, and therefore the figures will meet or be under the 30 caseloads per officer.
Thank you. And we've seen that the caseloads are rising. Do we think we'll probably have to ask for more money above the 75,000 in the years to follow?
Can I take that, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely, that could well be a possibility in future. However, as Sarah already mentioned, we are applying for as much grant funding as possible. Unfortunately, we've not been successful so far, but moving forward, we hope to be successful, and we will use that grant funding then to cover any additional support that is required. But absolutely, we've seen through COVID a significant rise in the number of cases coming forward. So it's something that officers and councillors are particularly aware of, and something that we need to continue to monitor. And if it comes to the point next year that we don't have any more grant funding, then we'll do the same again and apply for a special item. But all the way through, focusing on getting that grant funding rather than having to put a growth bid in.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of times. We've got Laura, Pauline and Adrian, and I want to make us move on. So what I'd like is to ask about the budget, as opposed to if there is a risk associated with the budget going forward. That's fine. If there's general questions, then please don't.
It's just quickly, how much grant funding are we hoping for? Knowing that we might not be successful, but just knowing what that number might be.
I mean, it's really difficult to give a precise figure. It depends on the pots of money that are available to us at the time. I think it's it's MHA, isn't it? That we have applied for. It depends on what grant pots are available and how much they're offering. But obviously, you know, the amount that we're asking for, we need to at least cover that in the way things are going. Obviously, if the trajectory continues, with more cases coming in, then we'll need to apply for more, but we'll keep monitoring it and see what pots become available and what we're able to apply for.
Okay, Pauline.
Just a quick question about methodology, so I got my head straight. So you're only asking for £75,000 for 1 year, if I follow Graham's methodology, which is if it's a one-off, it's not going to be in year 2 and year 3.
At this stage, so this is onto the growth table, but we're moving it to a special item with a view of you know, looking at grant funding, and obviously we are lobbying as well, you know, through the Domestic Abuse Commissioner as well. Unfortunately, areas like Wokingham are not seen as priority places, but making the point that we have just as high levels of domestic abuse as other areas. But yeah, at the moment it's for 1 year only.
So is that realistic, given what planning said about the difficulty in using their special item to recruit people for what will turn out to be a year or less? Is that realistic? Or would it be better looking for a longer period? I know you're not looking for more expenditure, you're looking for less, but would it be better to look for a longer period that means it's easier to get somebody? Because generally, the shorter the period of the contract, the more you pay for the people, is my experience.
Fran, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, because yeah, if we're getting a special item in, then normally what we would do is advertise on a fixed term basis. However, given what we've already talked about around the fact that cases are rising, it will be up to the provider to decide how they advertise. But I suspect that they would be looking to advertise on a longer term basis than just 1 year. But that would be up to them. But yeah, absolutely understand what you're saying, and it is difficult to recruit at this time. But given the financial constraints that we're under at the moment, this is the way that we're proposing the growth at the moment, given that there's opportunity for us to apply for as much grant funding as possible.
I just want to make the point is we do have an agenda item about domestic abuse going on, and I think identifying the risks with the domestic abuse agenda is more appropriate for that point rather than this budgetary one.
It was really the risk over recruitment I was interested in, and the knock-on cost effect of trying to recruit very short fixed-term contracts, which there is one. It might be better, Fran, if you showed the expenditure over more than 1 year and showed an income in the other column, and then you're not actually impacting the budget in year 2 and year 3, but you're actually being able to recruit somebody over a longer period, which then might make them cheaper and easier to retain.
Yeah, absolutely. Take that on.
Thanks. Adrian.
Something we can discuss.
Yeah, I think this is for Fran actually, but this 75 grand here is this for 2 people? You said is this 2 times 37.5 grand, or is it the fully loaded cost of a person? What actually is this 75 grand? Is this current rates of charging for a year for this level of person? Is it, I mean, how solid is this number? Is it just a number plucked out of the air, or is it a really solid number?
No, it's a solid number which has been given to us by the provider. The contractor that we're working with, who has said in order to be able to cover off the numbers of cases that are being reported to us, this is the figure that they will require from us to be able to support.
So that's their service charge to WBC?
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, moving on to page 56, which will be Sarah's final item.
Yeah.
Again, can I, sorry, Sarah, I just want to limit the questions to about the budgetary aspect of it as opposed to anything else.
Oh, no worries. I actually think that the name of this item doesn't really do it justice. This is actually this is an item that was a special item last year that came through and is in the current budget. It's a 3-year item, and these are the final 2 years of that. So this is actually for 2 members of staff in the climate emergency team. We have had 2 people in there. We're actually recruiting to refill those at the moment due to staff moving on. But this is to ensure that we do the actions from the deliberative process and the behaviour change that goes with that. And if you just bear with me a minute, my VPN is about to drop, so I just need to redo that. So if you lose me, that's why, but hopefully I'll make this seamless.
Okay, questions? Comments? Pauline?
If I understood what Sarah said, she said that it was previously a special item, which is what the 180,000 is presumably. So is this actually a cost reduction rather than an increase? In that if it was 180,000 last year, it's 90,000 this year, or is this 90,000 on top of 180,000?
So it's a special item. So there was 90 last year, 90 this current year, then 90 the next year, and then 90 the year after. So it's special items, so fixed term contracts for people.
So the 180 is not the same figure. It's a completely different scope, is it?
Right, let me have a look at the report. So the 100.
That's 22-23, Sarah.
Yep. That total budget for activity figure, Rhiannon, you might need to, I think Rhiannon, you're on the call. You might need to help me out with that one.
Hi there. I'm not actually, that talks about 22-23. I'm not sure why that says 180, to be honest. The actual amount is 3 times 90, which would be 270,000. But we can take that way and have a look at it. And I'll try and understand why it says 180 there.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? Nope. Okay, so I think that's done for Sarah there and Sarah and team. So thank you for coming along, and we'll move on to the more substantive items for this evening, which will be interesting. So I'll hand this back over to Graham.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I was going to use this as a way of steering our way through it. So I was going to point to here, but of course this is referencing where the details are. Okay, so if we go to the beginning, we've got just the very beginning of place and growth. That's it. Now one slide on. That's it. So this is the beginning of the savings, and you'll see that there's a large tranche that are associated with Ian Shenton, lead member. So I'll hand over to Ian to highlight key areas he wishes to. Obviously, you have the detail in the business cases, and those references are there, R1, R2, 3, 4, down to 8. And obviously, you'll be able to ask questions after Ian's summarised.
The element of place and growth that falls into my remit is effectively environment. And the nature of that beast is there's quite a lot of smaller item, relatively smaller items, with the exception of waste and recycling, which is quite a large item. And therefore, the nature of the savings proposed tends to mirror that. Many of them are relatively small, but the larger savings potentially could come from waste and recycling. The biggest of all is the top line, which is entirely subject to the outcome of the waste strategy consultation. And because it would require an in-contract renegotiation, as the contract runs to the beginning of 26, we're not putting anything in for 23, 24 on that, but it's subsequently. The saving you see there is effectively entirely at this point confined to pushing elements out of the residual waste stream into recycling, and therefore reducing the cost per tonne of disposing of the waste. I would say that since this document was prepared, work has been ongoing, has been continuing. Some of the figures further down the table have changed and will continue to change before everything is finalised. But at this point in time, the waste saving is conservative because we don't know exactly what, and work is still going on to identify what potential it has. I would say, though, that should the outcome of the strategy consultation indicate 3 weekly waste collection rather than alternate weeks, 2 weekly waste collection of residual, the saving would be larger.
Okay, before I'm going to take your question, Adrian, what I'm going to do here is go through like we did with Lindsay's and Sarah's, is go for each of the line items there. So I'll call out the page numbers, we'll jump to the item, ask the questions and be focused on the revenue as opposed to sort of any other type of decisions with that. If you do ask another decision, then I'll cut you short because we've got a lot to go through. Okay, so Pauline, you've got a question there. I know Adrian had a question, but I'm going to, are you asking about process or? No. Okay, so I'm going to start with Adrian. So we'll go to page 23 and then I'll come to Pauline. And then Shirley, thank you.
So, yeah, thanks a lot, Ian. I was quite confused by this because the contract terminates in 2026, but you're bringing a saving of 700k in 24-25. You're assuming that the contractor is going to renegotiate in a nice way with you. Do you think that's a realistic, potentially achievable thing?
I'm sure they want to retain the contract. The saving itself comes from effectively the containerization that would go along with an alternate weekly collection.
That was another question. What's containerization? Sorry. What is containerization?
It would be wheel bins.
Okay, thanks.
And so that would move waste out of the residual stream into the recycling stream, because at the moment 57% of the contents of the blue bags could be recycled.
If I'm honest, when I look at this business case, I think there's several aspects to this. One is the contract renegotiation. Clearly, it would be cheaper for them to run their vehicles in terms of fuel and members of staff on a bi-weekly or 3-weekly basis rather than a weekly basis. So they could save on contract drivers, for example. No, they couldn't save on any driver time. The driver time would be the same, would it?
At this point, we are making the assumption that the saving would come from the removal of waste from the residual stream to the recycling stream.
Okay, so my
interrupt here? I think Richard's got a point and maybe Fran.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wanted to just add that, so the 700,000 figure that we've got in there at the moment is really high level. We have done some work with external consultants who have looked at other authorities who have moved to alternative weekly collection or 3 weekly collection of a similar size to Wokingham and have generated around that figure. As Ian says, the main saving will be around containerisation, but also diversion of waste. So the containerisation is bringing in wheelie bins. So having wheelie bins, alternative weekly, 3 weekly, automatically we should see a reduction or minimisation of the amount of waste that's coming through. But on top of that, we will see diversion of waste. So people will we're hoping that people will start to recycle their food waste and also green recycling better. And on top of that, yes, you're right, there is an opportunity to see some efficiencies or savings through the contract. But at the moment, that 700k that we've put in is largely based on containerisation and diversion. We are doing a significant amount of work in the background to refine the figures that we've got, do some modelling work as well to make sure that we've got as accurate a figure as possible. But this was the first figure that we developed through, like I say, work with our external consultant.
I mean, obviously there is a clear cost here. There will be a capital cost at some point for all the wheelie bins. I don't know how many wheelie bins we're going to have. How many households is there? 60,000 households? Somebody give me a number. How many households?
So really your question is just, what's the underlying cost for the wheelie bins provision?
It's okay saying we're going to.
Adrian, can we just get an answer to that question?
We're going to save some money. That's potentially possible.
I just want to. You asked the question, which is what's the underlying cost of the wheelie bins?
Yeah, so there'll be you're absolutely right, there'll be a capital upfront cost. Richard will be able to provide more detail on the upfront cost, but it would be an invest to save. So basically we would be providing or purchasing the bins through a capital upfront cost. But at the moment we pay a significant amount through revenue for the blue bags. So if we've got containerisation, we've got the wheelie bins, we'll no longer have to provide those blue bags. So the saving on blue bags will help to fund the cost of purchase of the wheelie bins, and that will be over a period of time. I think when I was talking to Richard earlier, the payback was about 5 years.
You mentioned blue bags, but I think that's a separate item in here as well. You can't double count it.
So that's not included within the 700,000.
Okay, thank you. I think this needs a lot more fleshing out to include the capital costs of the wheelie bins and everything else, and the renegotiation of the contract. But I'm very encouraged by it. Yeah. But I want to make sure we've got a really solid basis for these numbers.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree with you more. And all that work is ongoing in the background. The saving hasn't been included until years 2024-25. On top of that, within the bid itself, it makes it clear the RAG status is red, low certainty on figures and project delivery. At this stage, we wanted to be able to provide some kind of high level figure so that, finance could work with that, but at the same time recognising that there's a significant amount more work that is required on all of this, and we hope to be able to bring that to you shortly.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to, I think it was David, then Michael. Pauline, did you have one question? Yep. So David, Michael and Pauline and Shirley and Norman.
But this is just a simple question. I'm sure it's to do with my misunderstanding of how local government finance works. But why is this? I read this as being a one-off saving of £700,000 in 24-25. Why aren't we saving the same amount in 25-26?
The difficulty with all these tables is you can show things one of two ways. You can show it as cumulative and the impact on the year, and I'll just talk you through this one and for the understanding of everyone else. So this says it's a saving, and it's the same principle in reverse if it's a growth. So this says that in year one, nothing happens. That's straightforward. So there's a zero, cumulative zero in year. Then year two, we have a £700,000 saving to the baseline, which is effectively there forever. And then this is saying in year three, there is no further additional saving to that baseline. If you look at the cumulative below, you see that the impact is a saving from a 22-23 base this year. You'll see we have a reduction of £700,000 that continues into 25-26, which is that cumulative, and then would stay at 26, 27, 20. So it runs all the way through. So the way I would describe it is you have, say, on the other side in growth, if you have, say, a £50,000 comes in as growth salary, permanent member of staff, it shows as it would show in the single year of the growth is there forevermore until it changes. And therefore, the following year, if you don't recruit additional staff, you will see a zero because you've already got the previous year running all the way through. So the cumulative position shows its ongoing impact. So that question you asked, what happened to that 700,000? The cumulative movement shows it's still there in year three. What the zero in the box shows is there is no further saving on top of that £700,000 as an ongoing saving. Does that make sense?
So again, what I'm hearing you say, I think, is that what we're measuring tonight in all these figures is changing in the baseline. It's not about the total cumulative cash we've saved.
That's absolutely right. If you take the box, the 700, go back to the 700k, that is the change in the baseline. If you added up all 3 years, 0, 700, 0, you get this. It's a total £700,000 reduction in the baseline. However, in terms of your cash, the amount of pounds in the bank you have accumulated, you would save 700,000 in year two. That 700,000 would also be saved in year three, means you can add the two together to get £1.4 million over that 3-year period if you added up all the cash in the bank as a result.
But sorry, Graham, but you're doing the opposite when it's growth. So what you said under local plan salary budget was it was 19,000 one-off in 23-24. 19,000 in 24-25 and 19,000 in 25-26. If you use the same methodology, it would be 19,000.
Paul, in the answer to that question is, on the table, we're showing the cumulative position. On the template, we're showing both the particular impact in the year and below it, we're showing the cumulative position. And it's the cumulative position we show in the tables. It's the same as the line below the box, which is okay, as long as you understand it. Of course, there's always two ways you can show this. There's the impact in the single year or the cumulative position, and we tend to go for the cumulative position in the summary.
Okay, so I said, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on this one. Going back to wheelie bins, that would require obviously the wheelie bins themselves, expenditure on that, and also new vehicles as well to actually service them. So I'm kind of a little bit confused how you can probably make a saving out of a very, very big capital expenditure. So no doubt that can be explained to me as well. And also it says here that food waste will continue to be collected on a weekly basis. That will attract obviously a cost when that's being done. Surely when these vehicles are going round, and not every house will dish out food waste. It's like when you have the green waste, not every house does it. Can they not collect within that cost their normal blue bags and recycling as well within that? Because I fail to understand that, because these vehicles have got potentially be running on empty. I got a shaking from Stephen Conway. I would like to probably hear your view on it, Stephen, afterwards. Thank you.
Hear the views of the experts.
Yeah, I'll probably pass over to Richard, who's got a much better understanding of how the vehicles work than I do. But just to be clear that from investigation so far, we would not intend to use different vehicles. The wheelie bins can be picked up using the existing twin pack vehicles that we've got. And the way that would work is that at the moment you've got a split back, and so you would currently put recycling in one side and residual waste in the other side. What the intention would be is to have a vehicle collecting only recycling or only residual. But Richard can elaborate a bit more on that.
Can I just jump in here? This is sounding more like a business case analysis for this as opposed to the number. Because I know we've got a lot to get through, and what I would like to see is when this comes forward as a proper business case, is this analysis is done at that time. I think all we can expect the officers to say is, yes, we've taken that on board and we've accumulated that into this piece of information, and it will further detail will be coming in a business case that will be presented. Is that a fair comment?
Well, some of us obviously could only really make representations now. I would suggest that this is the best place to do that. And then officers can go away with the questions if they don't know the answers, or maybe put it into their business case. But when are we going to get a chance to do that, Chairman?
Yep, that's a good question. But my expectation on a business case for this would include that information. If it didn't, and I think you're asking pertinent questions for this, that should be in the business case. So Adrian's hand up.
Might we resolve that by bringing it to a future scrutiny meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand the red status. I think that the business case needs more fleshing out. We just wanted to try and do some scrutiny on this because it is a significant item. And I think we were perhaps I asked too many questions, but I think Michael's questions were reasonable.
I think the questions are reasonable. What I'm trying to do is actually say, have you taken account of all the risks that are associated with this? And you pointed out the answer is yes or no, as opposed to the technical details of how the bins are running and so forth, and which then come forth into the business case. Advice here. Okay, go on.
I was just going to say, my understanding is that the waste strategy consultation is going to go to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, so this could potentially form a part of that item. Would make sense.
Okay, so I don't mean to cut you short, Michael. I just wary of time, and it's an excellent question. David?
Some of this is presentational, isn't it? Because I take the fact that big numbers like £700,000 in the round, it's early days and so on. Got an argument about that. Then doing the pre-work, as I was reading through the case on 25 about no more blue bags, I sort of, what the hell are we doing? Just chucking the rubbish in the street or what? But of course it means wheelie bins, but that's not mentioned on the page. And there's things, sort of fundamentals like that, when we're putting these presentations together, would really help just to understand how the whole thing stacks up. You know, this is an additional 350 to the 700,000 front page. We might have saved ourselves quite a bit of time in the last half an hour.
Okay.
If that been put
Yeah,
together
that's
like
fine. Pauline, you had a point?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't quite understand the point that was being made about how we were going to make the savings in year 2 when the contract doesn't finish until 2026. That was the first point. And also I'd like to understand where the interest on the borrowings to pay for 70,000 wheelie bins is showing, because if they're £100 each, which they may or may not be, that could be 350 grand a year. So I don't know where that is either.
Right. So with regards to sorry, you cut out a bit on your first question. Can you repeat it, Pauline?
Sorry, Fran. The first question was, how can you possibly save it in 24-25 when the contract doesn't finish until 26?
Okay, yeah. So we have already started engaging significantly with our contractor, obviously subject to the outcome of the waste strategy consultation. However, there is opportunity to still make those savings, and that's largely based on the fact that we're not going to have to purchase new vehicles and we can look at various different efficiencies in the routes, etc., to be able to do that. But the detail will come out, as I say, once the modelling has been refined, and of course we'll be more than happy to share that information with Overview and Scrutiny Committee later down the line.
Thank you, Fran. I don't really understand what you said about not having to purchase new vehicles. I didn't think we purchased vehicles at the moment, do we? Or do we? I don't know. Go on.
So there's not going to be a significant upfront capital cost, and you know, we're not going to get penalised as far as we're aware at the moment through entering into a process like this earlier on than the end of the contract, and we're having those discussions with the contractor at the moment, but there's still opportunity to make the savings that we're talking about prior to the end of the current contract.
Thank you. The second question was, where's the interest on the 7 million quid you're going to have to spend on wheelie bins, perhaps, if it's 7 million quid?
So in later, or in the versions that we're working through at the moment, which aren't included within this 700,000 figure, we've included to cover off that interest, which would be required to purchase the bins.
And how much do you think that is, Fran?
Similar to what you've just said.
About 350 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think with this item, we've done the questioning there. I think the business case that we're going to be reviewing in a later meeting is going to be the important bit there. Sorry, Norman.
This one's just, yeah, Shirley had one as well, I think, actually. I know you want to move on. From the 700,000, how much of it, I know you need to do the detail, but at the moment, what are you assuming, how much are you assuming is from the diversion of waste from blue bags to recycling, and how much from other things?
So a significant amount of it is from diversion, and a significant amount of it is from containerisation. I wouldn't want to put specific figures on the breakdown of that 700,000 at the moment, especially because at the moment we're going through more detailed assessment, and you know, those figures are subject to change. But the majority of that figure, that 700,000, is through containerisation and diversion.
Okay, Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few. On the garden waste, last year this year rather, we increased the charge by £5 per annum, and now we're proposing to.
Sorry, Shirley, you've gone on to the next item. We haven't got there yet.
Sorry?
We're dealing with PGRG1 on page 23.
Sorry, PGR2.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought we were working on anything.
Yeah, I was just going to close the item on this one.
Oh,
and
I
then
see.
move on.
Sorry,
So
sorry.
you've got
Getting ahead of myself.
Yep. David.
Just trying to summarise what I think I've heard, that we take PGR1 and we have to take PGR3 as being part of that. What it basically means is we're going to save about £1 million, assuming that we, on the results when it comes out of the consultation, the overall assumption is move to wheelie bins. But we haven't got details of what the capital cost or the interest cost would be if we move to wheelie bins. So there's a balancing number to come in there at some point.
Yes, if I can just add to that as well. So at the time that these figures were first put together, the line which talks about blue bags was included separately because there was some discussion, regardless of whether we move to alternative weekly collection or 3 weekly collection, of getting rid of the provision of blue bags, and saying to residents that you know, they would just use their own black bags. Now that conversation didn't really progress any further, but it was intended to be included within this pack to demonstrate the saving that could be generated if that's the route that we wanted to go down. It's then moved on since then, because obviously we are now through the waste strategy consultation looking at the option for alternative weekly or 3 weekly collection. And if we do move to containerisation and wheelie bins, then we will also be no longer having to pay for the blue bags. So that's why originally it was included separately. But as we've been talking about we've been working on later iterations of these savings, and within our later iterations, those two figures are included together within one savings item.
Okay, just moving on then. So we have no further questions about that item. Just taking some advice here. What we should be focusing on is the year one saving, because the year two and year three are in the future. We know the world is changing. So if we take a look at the year one items and focus on that, please. Okay. Okay, so good spot there up. So moving on to the next one, which is RG2. So questions for that. Shirley, you get in first.
Thank you. A few questions on this. This year we increased the charge by £5 per annum, and now we're proposing to increase the annual charge by £10 per annum. Tell me, was there a reduction in the number of households who participated following the introduction, the increase in charge? Does this happen? Does it fall off each time we increase? And are we likely to get more people increasing? Do you want to answer one at a time, or do you want me to give you all three?
I can answer that one if you like, Shirley. Yeah, so we've seen no decrease from last year, the year before to this year in terms of numbers. So our numbers remain stable.
Right. Oh, that's encouraging. The other thing that concerns me, and this is a bit further down, but I might as well. Can I get that question in now, because it doesn't have a PG number? Let's talk about down here of introducing a charge for the garden waste bin. So I'm assuming that that's an upfront cost of 40 quid, which you would pay on top of your yearly charge. Is that right? Because I think that's going to put people off, and we want, at a time when we want to be encouraging more recycling, to introduce a charge for the bin seems to be a bit counterproductive.
Yeah, I see your point on that. And in fact, that line has actually been removed from this from future packs.
All right.
So we haven't accounted for that one, Shirley.
Okay, so that's not happening now.
No.
Right. Okay. Funny, all that easy. And every year I ask this, so I'm going to ask it again because I don't want to break with tradition. Have we ever considered looking into charging people monthly? Because I think you'd get more people if they could pay monthly for their brown recycling bin.
Yeah, and
every time I ask it, it's, oh yes, we'll look into that, but nothing happens, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And this relates back to the direct debit situation. I know, Shirley, we've conversed before on this one, and we're still working with the IT on that front to understand what actually can be done. So I'm sorry it's taking a bit of time to come up with the answer for you, but I promise you we will get to that point, and I will give it to you within a month.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Shirley. Going on to David, then Pauline, and then Adrian.
I'm kind of coming back to Shirley's first question, but it sort of reflects and discussions from earlier this week. There seems to be this underlying assumption of total inelasticity of demand, that if we put prices up, demand doesn't change. Therefore, if we didn't put prices up, does demand change or not? If we are correct in your assumption that by putting these prices up, you won't see any fall off in demand for the garden waste recycling, would it not be true that if you kept the prices as they were, you might see an increase in demand for recycling? I don't know, but I struggle with this whole concept that we can charge what we like and people still keep doing the same thing.
You raise an interesting point there, David, and I think this is to do with saturation points of the borough. So we've got a really good uptake of garden waste customers in the borough. We can get some more, certainly, but the question asked for us is to assess what can we do to assist in that £4 million revenue gap, and this is one of the options that have been proposed to achieve that.
So there is some risk associated with it, I guess.
Clearly there isn't, because we haven't valued it, but that's the bit I struggle. We can perhaps take that discussion outside the meeting, but that's the second one in 2 days where there's been no vision of any downside. And I'm not saying, I'm not for a minute questioning the integrity of the work that's been done or those involved in it, but it's, my own level economics said otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Pauline.
Thank you. I think it's probably a question for Richard. My recollection when this was brought in was we were told that you were only allowed to cost recover with charging for green waste. Is that right, or am I misremembering?
Cost recover in terms of, just explain a little bit further, Pauline.
So my recollection when we brought the green waste scheme in was we were told we were only allowed to charge enough for the green waste collection to recover our costs. Is that wrong?
I don't believe that is the case. I think we just need to assess that a little bit more, and then I can just explain. I will get back to you on that one. Is that possible?
Yeah, thank you, because it would put a bit of a torpedo through this if it was true.
Adrian.
Sorry, I couldn't actually hear Pauline's question very easily, but I think I might have a similar question. I see the total budget for the activity is 1.913 million. What's the actual cost from the supplier of this service? I mean, are we making a profit, if you like, on this service at the previous level, and this increase in £10 will generate a further profit, or what's the approximate situation?
Yeah, we need that's an interesting point. I think we need to just do a bit more analysis on that, Adrian. So once we've done that, we can come back to you. Sorry to be vague, but that's the situation.
I mean, I would like to see those answers, because, I think recycling's one part, but we should be trying to make sure these services, make a profit or something like that, if we can. And, we talked about the elasticity of demand over the last 2 days, and we see that people carry on paying for these things, even if the prices go up. So, perhaps we need to increase them a bit to make sure that we're generating the revenue, because, we've had 3 meetings in the last 3 days where Graham's explained the critical financial position, and we want to see some revenue generated, right?
Chairman, if I could just add to Richard's response, if I may. My understanding is that we cover the cost of the service and also generate income. It sounds like we need to go away and get the exact figures for you, which we can certainly share. However, any income generation that we make is then fed back into the service, so we use that income generation to fund the cost of other waste activities, etc.
Thank you very much, Fran.
Okay, Al, sorry.
Thanks. Just that the parallel sort of brown sack service, is that also going to be increased in proportion, and is that included in this item?
So you're talking about the brown sacks, which is obviously different to the brown bins, and I think that's going to have to be considered in the upcoming fees and charges.
And just the other thing, carry on from Shirley's point. I mean, I think we all know, if you've got a garden, that waste doesn't come regularly. So it's what, a monthly service. But I mean, just having an RFID chip in the bin. I mean, you could just pay per each time it's tipped, couldn't you? I mean that would be on an account. I mean, that would be a good way for most people to use their green waste.
Yeah, interesting point. And I think there's 2 things there. One is the actual bin having the chip in them, as you correctly say, and the other one is around the vehicles and the vehicles being able to scan them. So potentially that is certainly something to look forward to in 2026 when we renew our contract, and investigate that further, so we have that kind of flexibility.
I'm not suggesting that's actually going to save any money, mind you.
Okay, any other questions on this item? No? Okay, moving on to the next one. Just before we do that, I'm just looking for advice to people here. Do we want to do the bigger ticket items and rather than spend time on the smaller items? Because I know we've just looked at 255k, but cognizant of timing. So are there any particular items that we actually want to go into? I'm looking at advice from exec members, Graham, and members here. Yep, okay, we'll just crack through. No complaints about that. Ian, you've got a comment?
I was just going to point out a peculiarity of the savings bids and the growth bids, which both include an amount for the caddy liners, because this was put together before the outcome of Monday night's meeting was known. So they cancel each other out, and that I believe, and Graham may wish to comment further, but that's the reason there's that oddity in there.
Yeah, it has a net nil impact as a growth and a savings, so I wouldn't spend any further time on it. We spent enough on it the other night. Chairman, going back to your point, the whole purpose of this is for the committee to feel that they understand and can contribute sufficiently to the process. That's the only reason we're here. So it's however you collectively want to play that.
Okay, that's fine. I was just making sure everybody was happy. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to look at those items that they're interested in, as opposed to we get rat-tailed into an item that nobody's really interested in.
I mean, I agree with the chair, actually. You know, we need to concentrate on the big ones. You know, if we spend 30 minutes discussing a 10k item, it's pointless.
Okay, so what I'll do is we'll go with, as we're doing, go for the items. Keep your questions short and to the point, detail the budget, and then we'll zip through. If there is an issue there, I'll stop it and then revisit. Okay. We're now moving on to page 25, PG R3. That's the cease the provision of residual waste blue bags. Yep, so we'll skip that one because it's got zero saving on this year. Okay, number 4, RG4. Sorry, again, if we do skip something and you do have an urgent question, please ask it. Moving on to PG RG4. David.
Just addressing this one and a couple of others that basically come down to lower maintenance issues on areas of rough ground. I can see the saving, but we end up looking like a very scruffy borough. Is there a role here for community groups to perhaps try and adopt some of these verges, open spaces, or whatever it is we're talking about in order to maintain them?
I think there's a role for people to actually nominate areas where they would like conservation to take precedence over neatness and tidiness, because I've had emails directly from residents around the borough, not just in my own ward, suggesting that why are you cutting this grass on a regular basis? Equally, you see comments on social media about why has this been left so long? But there is a difference of opinion amongst our residents, and but I suspect if we asked for an input from residents, we would get some nominations of areas that people wanted to see left long, or allowed to grow to wildflowers.
I think the question was more in about, yes, there are some where we bona fide wildflower areas which are very effective and attractive, but where we're using wildflower area for a bit of a euphemism, we're not cutting it back. Where that's happening, could we engage or get community groups to sponsor the actual maintenance of it as opposed to the planting of it, where that's appropriate?
I'd be very happy to try that route.
Okay, anybody else on that one? No? Okay. Al, sorry, Al.
I was just saying, I'm not sure the precept payers will early be super pleased on picking up the bill if town council to do it instead of instead of the borough, but so.
Okay, moving on to, actually, I did have one question on that. It mentions external external consultants. Stephen.
It's not for me to determine how the committee approaches this, but I'm just thinking in terms of perhaps focusing on the items you really want to focus on. And all of Ian's items could be taken together and you could invite questions on anything you wanted from there rather than going through line by line. So the temptation is if a line comes up to want to ask a question about it, even if it's not really necessary. And then you could do the same with Paul's. You won't have much to say to me, and so on. I don't know whether that would expedite matters.
Yeah, we're just moving on here. So we'll continue as is. Thank you. Just did ask a question about external consultants.
Do you like me to answer that one, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So we've got external consultants engaged to look into the grounds maintenance contract. They're assessing the productivity of the contract, and we're hoping that we could realise some sort of savings from that as well, from the work they were actually doing, which will help feed into this wider bit of work.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to RG5. I do have one question. Has there been a comparative look at for the costs for private hire?
That work's still ongoing with our commercialisation team. The best we know and got direct experience of is what happens at Dinton Pastures and also California Country Park. So the result, the events that we run over there, as well as the income generation. So some of it can be overlaid on that, but it's also looking a bit further afield with other boroughs in terms of what they're doing, especially neighbouring boroughs, to glean some insight as to what actually could work and how much could be realised.
Okay, thank you. Adrian.
Yeah, this I found quite interesting because there's a similar thing going on in Wokingham Town Council where we're looking at sort of 4 bandings for different categorizations, call them t-shirt sizings if you like, for different sort of charging regimes. It might be worthwhile to have a discussion with the town council folks who do the events for them, to kind of, you know, cross-pollinate and get some best practice. But I think if you just do an acre by acre, that's not what the town council are thinking about. They're thinking about a much more, you know, commercial orientated pricing model.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to make.
I think that's really important, what you said there, Adrian, and I think it's joint working with all town councils to see what they're doing as well, to potentially harmonise and reflect in terms of what we're doing and what they're doing, to the benefit of both authorities.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've got a bunch of items here which have got no PRGs, so they're low numbered items, so I'm going to say we skip those unless there's any urgent question. Looking around, no. Okay, going on to PGR6. Yep, year 2, so we'll miss that one. Going on to number 7, which Graham.
Chairman, just to be clear, you're absolutely right to give the steer to focus on year 1 because that is the issue that's immediately upon us, but I wouldn't want to give you the impression you're not allowed to inquire, understand or contribute to future years because it is a 3-year MTFP. But I understand in terms of making business, year one is the most important, and the size of the number as well, of course.
Yeah, sorry, thanks for the clarity. Adrian.
Yes, on R6 is something that's close to my heart because it's, what I do in my day job, intelligent enterprise stuff, sensors and grids, so that you do predictive maintenance, which means you don't need to spend all the money on doing the places where you don't need to do the work. I think this is a really wonderful thing. And I think as a sensor technology, improves and enhances, we'll see more and more of this. But there should be sensors in the lights, sensors in the highways, sensors in the grass verges, sensors in the trees, telling, there should be sensors everywhere.
Where's the question?
Yeah, I saw one presentation where they were talking about sensors being put in trees because then they could work out the optimum time for the tree to be cut down in a managed forest. But I really like this idea, so I'd really like to see this happen.
Okay, so we're not going to have a discussion on sensors because whatever. Shirley, you raising your hand there?
Well, it's not on AGs again, but I was a bit confused when I read this one. It said increase hourly rate for licensing team from 59 to 65, and I thought, how can increasing something make a saving? But I think it must be the hourly charge that the licensing team make rather than the hourly rate that they get paid. That's what threw me. So I think maybe that should be charge rather than rate.
No, that wasn't a line item, RG1, so it's just a line item.
Yeah, that's correct. That hourly rate is the rate that which is used to calculate the fees which are charged for different types of licensing.
Okay, moving on to RG8 on page 30. Pauline?
Just to make sure that, Fran, are you convinced this isn't going to cause road flooding?
So at the moment, we have been carrying out reviews of our drainage grips. We've been doing it actually for the last year to 2 years. And actually, a large proportion of the grips that we have, we've got about 4,000 in the borough, and just so that everyone knows what a grip is, because I'm aware that not everyone will know. It's a small ditch which is usually found in the grass verge next to a carriageway, typically in rural areas where there's no positive drainage system, piped system under the ground. So we use a drainage grip channel to drain the carriageway, and the water will just run off through the grip and into a ditch nearby. And like I say, we've been monitoring our grips for the last couple of years, and we have actually picked up that a large proportion of the 4,000 that we cut don't actually need recutting every year. The reason that we cut them every year is because our highways maintenance management plan requires that we do that. Having said that, if we're looking at a more risk-based approach, and given the fact that we need to look at our finances, the evidence that we've gathered over the last couple of years suggests that we don't need to cut them every year, and actually moving to an every other year basis would be sufficient. That being said, we can still ensure that the drainage team carry out proactive inspections of areas that we know are susceptible to flooding. And so if we needed to carry out some kind of reactive grip cut during the year, we would carry that out anyway.
Okay, and Callum's told me we've got a flooding update in March, so we'll be able to see the results of that. Adrian.
I'm really not happy with this item at all because I see this as a risk benefit sort of item. If there is a flood somewhere, if we get some unusual weather, we're going to save 25 grand. But what is the potential risk of a massive flood somewhere. It's hugely greater than 25,000. And this, please correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Fishwick, but didn't we have a problem with the ridges, which was a maintenance issue of drains and these kinds of things, which has cost us millions of pounds, and we're going to save 25 grand here? I don't want to spend millions of pounds fixing a road that when we've saved 25 grand.
Yeah, Chair, you're quite correct, Adrian, that the ridges, it was a drainage problem, which then caused subsidence in the embankments. It wasn't a grip, but it was a drainage system that caused the problem. Grips are very different, as explained by Fran. I've always been used to, in my professional career, on an annual basis to clear them out. But if Fran and the team have done some survey work and they've found that they don't need to clear all of them, and they've got the evidence behind that, that's fine.
Imogen.
I'm just sort of in point of what Adrian's saying. I mean, we don't currently have these sensors everywhere, and it's reliant on people, the traditional method of doing this. We're trying to find 4 million worth of revenue savings, and at the moment what I'm seeing is reviewing the things that have been suggested, but we're not seeing much in the way of what else we could do or where we're going to make this 4 million savings. So you're sort of just reviewing the things that have been suggested, but we need more than what's these things that have been suggested. So, I mean, if we are going to say, right, well, we want to put something back in, we also, that then adds to our 4 million that we need to go and find. Yes, I think I'll leave it there. But the point is that we really need to be looking at the growth bids and things like that and saying, do we need this? Yeah.
So you're suggesting we change the way we do the order of this?
No, I'm saying it's fair enough to look at these, to review these, but what the main reason what we need to be doing is where are we going to find this extra revenue, basically, and that is one of the important things we need to be doing.
Okay.
Just one small comment. I think next time when we have this meeting, you guys need to tell us which order we need to do things in, and then we will do them in the order that you tell us. Thanks.
David.
Yeah, I think just to your point, which no one's saying we shouldn't make the saving. What we're trying to do is this actually the saving we're going to make?
I understand, and I don't object to reviewing these, but we also need to be looking at where else we can make more savings.
Okay, moving on. So we go to, I think that's the end of Ian's revenue ones. We've still got your bid ones later. So let's go on to Paul's revenue savings. So moving on to page 31.
Thank you. There's no saving in year one on this, but this particular one is linked to PG 33, which is on page 55. It's extending the rollout of parking enforcement outside schools. So the equipment and the operational costs to start everything up is in year one, 183,000. So that's a special item. And in year two, that will then bring in the savings estimated at 50,000.
David.
I'm just questioning on this one, Paul, the ongoing figures for income. Are there any assumptions here about behaviour change? I mean, if I keep parking outside the school and get fined 50 quid, presumably I won't come back the next week and get fined another 50 quid.
Once we've caught you, David, and we know you're probably not going to be coming back, they are moved around. So that's part of the operational costs. Okay, and then we'll come back again and catch you the second time.
I was referring to the fact there's if you change people's behaviour, they don't park outside schools, you might expect that income to drop over a period of time for the plan.
It's it's a period of time that they're outside of the schools, outside a particular school, and then they move to another school and so on. So it's continuously being moved around, and it's just a bigger pool of equipment that we'll now be using.
Pauline.
Is this the drive-by enforcement essentially?
Effectively, it's all to do with that, yeah, and some fixed cameras as well.
Good.
So the trial started, the trial was successful, and this is rolling out further.
So I'm very keen on this for road safety reasons and for all sorts of other reasons. I'm a bit dubious about the likely income, a bit like you, because usually people move on within the 10 minutes before you can give them a ticket, etc., etc., etc. But if it deals with the road safety, then I think it's a good thing to progress.
I would agree, Pauline. If they do move on, that's absolutely brilliant. It served its purpose. It is around road safety outside of schools, but there are people, particularly when it's picking up time, arrive half an hour or so or more. They try and get the prime spot and have a chat with the other parents as well, and it is picking those ones up.
Okay, Al.
Just to say that schools have a churn of parents, and so you can expect new people every year to be picked up by the scheme. It's
That's the point I'm trying to get to in this is if, as Pauline says, this is I totally support the idea, so don't get me wrong. If it's a road safety issue, you're expecting this to change behaviour. Therefore, people won't park out schools quite so frequently. If they're not parking out schools quite so frequently, you will issue less tickets, and therefore the number you might expect will drop off. Maybe I don't know how significantly, but we're just assuming here that the same number of people will be parking outside the school and being caught as frequently and fined as frequently over the period of the plan. And that's fine if that's the assumption, but it can't be both a road safety case and a financial one.
Okay, Andy Glencross. Oh, I think Andy's there.
Yeah, I thought just jump in and help out. A couple of things I picked up earlier, Pauline. You were talking about the 10-minute grace period, and if you note on this bit, it's about the enforcement of school keep clear markings, and there is no grace period. You're right. The difficulty with outside schools, often on double yellow lines, is people aren't there long enough. What Paul is also saying is you talk about mobile cameras that move around from school to school each week. So you will get a repeat offenders, I suspect, because the cameras won't be there all the time and they'll take the risk, certainly in the morning.
Thank you, Andy.
And that has been the case, of course, when with lots of our schools, we have the enforcement officers turn up for a week or something like that, and everybody goes away, and then they realise that the enforcement haven't been around for a while, and then they all come back again. So I think.
Moving on, next one.
There's
I'll tell. So what I was going to do is
business case reference on the next one, but this is basically working with town and parish councils for any highways work.
Shirley.
Sorry, Shirley, I just wanted to mention the top one in case anybody had any questions, because there is 20,000 in the first year. Okay.
Yes.
So next one is R10. Right. This is so the first residence parking permit can be charged, but we are fixed on that first permit. The second one is open, and this is an opportunity to charge something more. There's a £900 been put in there. This is not been fixed yet. There's a bit further work to be done. And that's really as much as I'd like to say on that. I wouldn't say the rag status is green. I'd say it was actually red at the moment.
Shirley, and then Adrian.
All I wanted to ask was, what do we charge for a second permit at the present time?
There's 69 permits currently per year, and they are charged at 35, I think it is.
How much, sorry?
35.
£35 for the second one,
Yeah.
and now you're proposing to.
That's why I said
It's £900.
the 900 is not fixed.
No.
This is in the red zone.
I should think that even Reading don't charge that, and theirs are expensive.
Adrian.
Yes, sorry, perhaps I'm missing the plot completely here, but you're talking about somebody who's got 2 cars and it's the second car that you're charging only.
The first permit they buy is at £35. Okay, they've got no off-street parking, and this is in a residence parking zone.
Yeah.
So the first permit is at £35. That's constrained. The second permit can be charged at any cost that we like. So it's an opportunity to increase that. Now, in this report here, it currently shows £900 to line up with a season ticket in the off-street car parking. I'm saying that is currently not on green, that is on red. This needs to be worked through properly.
Pauline.
Just intrigued what the constraint is on the 35.
There is currently a constraint on there. That's why this needs to be worked through properly. There's a bit more work to be done.
Okay, moving on to the next one, RG11. I think we covered that quite in detail yesterday, so I'm not proposing we go through that. No.
Sorry, Chair. The page 33, because it does link. Bear with me a second. R11. This links with PGR25, which is a growth, and R31, which is a special item. All of those brought together is an accounting way to show that the financial budget is balanced. R25 and then R31.
Okay, so we'll jump through those when we get to them. Okay, David.
So just picking on Paul's point there, what we're saying is that the increase in parking charges alone doesn't cover the deficit, and you've got 2 other items there to fill the gap. Is that right?
That's correct.
Norman.
Just to be absolutely sure, the R11, that is the charges that were voted on by executive at the end of September. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to R12 on page 34.
R12 is really some forward planning on increasing income from off-street or all parking charges in year 2. That's in year 2. There's nothing in year 1 because the year 1 is what we discussed last night.
Would this essentially be some form of parking meter or Ringo or something?
It's really to look at all of the charges across the board of off-street and as well as residential to link everything together. So that there's further work to be done on that, but it's a year 2. So it's really making increasing off-street parking in smaller step changes.
Norman.
So again, just to confirm, this is in addition to what was voted through by executive in September. These are additional charges on top of that.
That is correct. Yeah. So nothing further in next year because what the executive agreed on 29th of September goes through into next year. And this is some forward planning looking at year 2, 24-25.
Pauline.
For the record, can we be clear that just because we're not questioning things doesn't mean necessarily we agree with it, but we do understand it?
Yep, absolutely. Okay, next one. which is page 35, RG 13.
Yeah, so this is introducing on-street parking controls in town centre areas. It's where we've got limited waiting currently, which is free, and linking that in with the residential parking that we've got, because more people are now working from home. We want to ensure that those spaces are really reserved for them and have the waiting restrictions, which are limited, being chargeable. So this is a lot of work's got to be done on this. We are only at very early stages, hence why it's marked up as red. Okay.
Adrian, then Pauline, and then Shirley.
I was looking at this one. Is this about having parking meters in certain hotspots? Is that really what it is?
That's exactly what it is. There's many towns have got parking meters. Some areas which I worked in many years ago introduced them in 1998, 1999 and 2000 in their town centres, where there was limited waiting and charged for an hour or 2 hours. So there were short stay type arrangements.
Pauline.
I'm just making sure that this doesn't overlap in its benefits with point 4 of RG12.
It is separate. It is separate, yeah.
Shirley.
The 12 is a stretch target for off-street parking.
Yeah, I think Pauline's trying to make the point here that it actually says introduction of on-street parking. So you've got some wording terminology that needs to be fixed.
That is quite correct. That number 0.4 there is really for R13.
Just to be clear, Paul, you haven't double counted the benefits.
No, not double counted the benefit.
Shirley.
Chair, yeah, all I was going to ask on this was, have you had any conversations with Reading Borough Council, because they introduced parking meters everywhere, all over the place, and miraculously all the cars just vanished. We don't know where they went, but we did.
Went over the border.
Oh well, then yeah, no, there's no parking meters that have caused that. There's a lot. That's the residents' parking zone. But round by the Royal Berks Hospital, for example, used to be absolutely full of cars. Now there's hardly any there. To the point that Reading have just decided to weekends and evenings. Then they're not going to bother to monitor the parking meters because they're not getting enough income to pay the cost of monitoring the parking meters. So it may well be that parking meters will just mean that people will disappear. And then there's the cost associated with putting the parking meters in, which you may not recover for many, many years.
As I said earlier, Shirley.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. We're right at the very beginning. It might come to a point where it's not really right to do it. We haven't made that decision yet, but it's really flag in the ground. This is something that we're looking at to potentially bring some income in.
Pauline, you've cancelled that. Okay. David.
So Paul, just to be clear, there'll be a capital cost associated with this at some point as well?
Yes, there would be. It would also need a traffic regulation order as well.
Sorry, Peter, that was the point. I just decided not to go into it, but seeing as you've mentioned it, if you do what Westminster do, they don't have a parking meter cost at all. They've just got a little sticker on their lampposts and they use Ringo and there's no cost.
That is all the sort of things that we need to look at. What is the cheapest option to bring in and how are we going to operate it? And it's got to link into our systems as well.
Okay, moving on. Next one, RG 14, page 36.
This really links in with 13. So if successful, then it's really looking at a further stretch target on that. But we've got to do the early work first.
Okay. Next one, page 37, R15.
On 15, this is a red status. This is some work which is being done on use of transport planning expertise and whether or not we bring in people directly. So it's whether or not are those savings really going to be made? Are we going to make those efficiencies? So that's being looked at. It may or may not work out. So early work at the moment.
Shirley.
Thank you. Can I just ask what WSP stands for?
They're one of our consultants, WSP. Wilson, Scott, Patrick, I think they were called, or partnership. They all join together. Numbers, they join together sometimes. I think it was Wilson and somebody, and then Wilson, Scott and partnership.
Quick question with regards to the relationship with WSP. Is it a fixed term contract or is it a ongoing pull someone in contract?
There is a fixed term contract that we've got with them, which is then be renewed.
Okay, thank you. David.
This bit in general, when we quote a cost for the person here, 61k, is that a salary cost or is that fully costed as an employer?
That's a fully costed as an employer.
Okay, next one, moving on to R16 on page 38.
Again, this is early work. This is working with our contractors to see what savings we can making efficiencies in the work that we do and the type of work that we do. So that's really all I can really say on that. There's a lot of work and negotiations going on that one.
Okay, Shirley.
Can I just ask that there's quite predicted saving in 2023-24 is just under 400,000, which is pretty big saving for something which you say is at a very, very early stage. Do you think you're going to get anywhere close to that for that financial year?
That is the best estimate at the moment on the work that's been done. There are some areas we think we can get some savings and efficiencies out of, but they've got to be worked through because this is a contract that we've got with these particular contractors.
Pauline.
What's the expenditure pool? What's it for?
I can't recall what the expenditure was. Can I get back to you on that one?
Andy, do you have any comments on that?
I'm not sure if Andy will help. Sorry, I forgot Andy was there. Sorry, Andy.
All right. I was going to say, do you mean what is the highways expenditure with Volkers each year? Is that what you're trying to ask?
No.
What's the expenditure in the box?
There's 210,000 in an expenditure box in year one, and I cannot remember what it was for. I'm afraid. So I'll get back to you.
Okay, moving on to RG 17, page 39.
Oh yeah, 17. So this is at Carnival Pool. Currently, Carnival Pool Leisure or Carnival Hub has a 2-hour free parking. It's a contractual arrangement. I have asked for that to be negotiated out so we get funding coming directly in. There is discussions ongoing with the leisure contract about that.
Pauline, then Laura.
Just seeing as you were looking for other ideas, have you thought about taking away the subsidy on the park and ride for Reading buses as well? That we currently give them, I don't know what the subsidy is, Andy will remember, but there's a subsidy on anybody parking in the park and ride at Winner's Triangle, for example. that subsidises the bus but doesn't subsidise the train, which has never struck me as being particularly logical. Not there at the moment, but you're building a new park and ride. The way the parking in there works is that the parking cost and the bus cost are all lumped together in one thing. And there is a subsidy on the parking for people who use that Reading bus. My question is, if you're going to start charging leisure users in Carnival Park, have you thought about undoing that arrangement in some way? In that it makes no logical sense to me to subsidise a bus at a railway station where you're not subsidising the train. Just a question, that's all.
Yeah, thank you for that. Willis Triangle charges will be looked at totally separately anyway, when we get that up and running.
Norman? It was Laura first, then Norman. Sorry, Laura.
Apologies. Could something similar be done at Loddon Valley Leisure Centre car park and also Bournemouth car park?
Possibly. The difference here is that Carnival Hub forms part of the town centre car parks, where Loddon Valley is not in a town centre. It's adjacent to Asda. Asda allow X hours parking free. After that, you'll get a ticket or something. So all you'll end up doing with Loddon Valley is displacement into Asda. With Bournemouth, there isn't any other location really nearby, apart from if you do want to walk from Woodley Town Centre. So the displacement would then be out onto Woodlands Avenue, which is something that we wouldn't want to do.
Okay, Graham.
I was just going to say, reluctantly, although I think it's great that we're getting ideas, additional ideas, but on this particular one, there is a high risk in that we receive a significant management fee profit distribution effectively from Places Leisure. So if we act in a detrimental way to their income stream, we will feel that directly. So we may save 100,000 and lose 200,000 if we're unlucky. But you know, you get the drift. We need to work that through. But it's great that ideas are coming forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a comment on this one. I was just wondering about the impact on the library users. So.
In my view, everybody who is using that car park should be charged in some way. If it ends up that the Carnival Hub users are still allowed their 2 hours through the contract that we've got with the leisure company, we're getting it back in a different way. That's why that's got to be worked through.
Okay.
That's why I asked for that to be looked at.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
My recollection is with the old library, people pay for parking anyway. So I don't see why they shouldn't with the new library.
Okay, that's fine. Right, moving on to the next one. Page 40.
Page 40,
Page 40,
R18. So this is the introduction of moving traffic enforcement offences. So this is where there's a banned right turn at the moment. People make a turn right. It's really meant to be enforced by Thames Valley Police. It's not really done. It's a road safety issue, and what government have done is they've allowed the powers to come down to highway authorities, but you have to submit a business case for it. We will need to go through that. We're working that through currently. So the bid will be in May 2023. Reading have got theirs lined up to go in for January next year. And then hopefully we'll get everything in place. We'll need to give a grace period, which is what happened when CPE came in, civil parking enforcement. And about 6 months later, we'll then certainly be able to charge.
Okay, Pauline.
Great news. I thought enforcement could only be cost recovery. Are we allowed to create this as a revenue stream?
Yes, it's providing it's ring fenced back into transport.
Is that transport enforcement or any form of transport?
Back into transport.
Okay.
So similar really in a way to civil parking enforcement, yellow lines, that is ring fenced back into transport. You've got to reinvest it back into that.
Yeah, I thought it was always reinvested back into enforcement, but about your knowledge. So is the cost in here as well?
There will need to be a cost for some equipment, which will need to go in, and people. Yeah. So that's being worked through at the moment on what that business case is. Okay. It's not quite finished yet, hence why it's at amber.
David.
So pick up on Shirley's point that clearly the capital cost in this as well. And we've talked a number of items through tonight, but we've got capital costs that aren't in here. And bearing in mind, we've got a 14 million capital problem already for this year. I'm just wondering how, because obviously, quite an exciting amount of income attached to some of these, at some point we have to look at how this capital stacks up for our priorities for next year as well.
Can I come back on that, Paul? Just add something to it. Just wanted to say that the way in which you deliver this service might not be by the council, it might be through a contract, so there may not be a capital cost. It's just that we haven't done the work on how we deliver it yet, so we won't know.
Hence why I said it's still work in progress. It's currently at amber. We've got to sort out how it's delivered.
Norman.
There's quite a few of these are at that sort of stage, and that's understandable. What's your timescale for altering these? I mean, clearly we're going to have to take a budget in February, so if we're going to have to look at that, it's going to have to be sooner rather than later.
It is, Norman. The work is being done at the moment, so it's just making sure we've got the numbers about right, and then we'll be able to put it in the final budget stream, because we're looking to submit this by May next year.
Okay, moving on. So RG19, page 41.
RG19, there's nothing in for next year. It's really looking at beyond that of making any savings. On dimming of street lights. They're already dimmed. They're dimmed a bit more. The next thing, possibly even switching them off. But there's work to be done on that, because we need to meet with Thames Valley Police on a risk assessment.
Surely.
So sorry, I was going to say some authorities like Essex actually started this in about 2012.
I was going to add to that is there any scope for there are certain areas not having traffic lights operating all the time? 24-hour traffic lights. I was thinking particularly, I don't know, Winner's Triangle, for example. There's all sorts of traffic lights there. There's no people, there's no cars. You drive through there and you stop. Seems to me that there are areas where you could turn off traffic lights. And I do see that in other places where they have peak time traffic lights and they don't have them on all the time.
At Winner's Triangle, they are linked to crossing points. In both cases by Winner's Triangle Station, and also there's a new one been put in on the road that goes past the Showcase Cinema. Yeah. So you can't switch those off.
I drove through there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's nobody about, and there are all these traffic lights, and they stop at every single. Once you get caught by one, you get caught by all, and it just. But I think there is scope. You do see lots of places around that have peak time traffic lights, and the rest. I don't know how much of a saving that is with LED lighting, but it all adds up presumably.
Minuscule on traffic signals. What you've also got to take into account is potential risk of increased accidents, therefore casualties. So it's a road safety side. The ones really are switching lights off totally. That's where you make your full saving, but that is something that we really do need to work through. As I said, some authorities doing that already. They're keeping their main street lighting on, but the side roads, they're switching off from midnight through to about 6 a.m.
Okay, Pauline.
I just wonder if you had any opportunity to get some low-hanging fruit out of this in year one by looking at the hours that are currently part-time part-time night lighting, part-time, you know what I mean? The ones that are already affected, and maybe increasing the hours of those and get a few bits of savings in year one without having to talk to the police at all.
There is some potential work that we could do to bring some of that forward, but I think the savings overall will be fairly small, but it is something that we can be looking at. As it shows in here, it's at red, it's at early doors at the moment.
Norman.
There were quite a few trials done a few years ago, so certainly worth revisiting that and what happened.
Okay, moving on to page 42, RG20.
This is really in service for the highways teams and working through some efficiencies, which they think they might be able to get, which is for next year, but it'll be a one-off saving.
David?
Are we looking at larger scale with it? I mean, when you say merging within that, is it within our highways team or with other councils' highways teams?
It's within our own highway service.
Are there options to examine working with and merging with other boroughs' highway teams, and for that matter, other departments with other boroughs?
What we do is use consultants to fill in the peaks. The efficiencies with actually using consultants is they've got some national experience as well, particularly when they're on specific special projects, and that's where that really does come into its own.
But for example, I'm going to just touch one out of the air. If we were to come to some sort of arrangement with, I don't know, West Berks or something, where we had a joint highways team across the borough, our borough and West Berks, is that sort of thing that like to serve any kind of savings, or is that a blind alley?
I think it's something which could be looked at in the medium, maybe term future, of working with our neighbouring authorities, but it's certainly not something within next year or within this MTFP.
Okay, next one, page 43, RG21. Sorry, Stephen.
It's been a rather long way. I hope I don't mess up my lines now. Essentially, the community engagement team of 7 officers was in housing. It's now in the Chief Executive's department, but most of the costs are covered out of the housing revenue account, some from public health, and a small amount, 92,000 approximately, from the general fund. The proposal here is to reduce the number of community engagement officers to 5, to remove 2 of the posts. That would then end the contribution of the general fund balance. So the remaining posts would be funded by the HRA plus a small amount for public health. I should add that one of these posts is currently vacant and the other one is on a contract that ends in December. So nobody will be made redundant or lose their job.
Adrian.
I just want to clarify what we're going to lose from these 2 roles. Community engagement officer, what does this mean? Working with social housing, or what is it?
There's a tenant engagement team which remains still in housing and is covered by the HRA. This was a community engagement team that was seen as distinct, hence the move into the Chief Executives. Although this is under housing, because housing has provided most of the funding, it is in fact not part of housing, it's part of the Chief Executives. So it's the broader areas of community engagement, but the Chief Executive's department is quite content that they can do this work with 5 officers.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Oh, Shirley.
So I just wanted to ask, so you're saying that the community engagement team, the tenants, on the housing side are going to remain as they are. That's fine. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm saying that the tenant engagement team remains within housing.
That's good.
And that's not affected by this.
No, that's good. So this is the general community engagement who do the announcements and send out stuff and put stuff on social media and all of that kind of engagement with the public.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. What slightly worries me about this is that we've got a lot of quite unpalatable decisions that are having to be made by council, and I think that there's going to be quite a lot of work for involve, communicate really good, effective communication with residents. And is this the time to be losing 2 community engagement officers?
Well, all I can say is that the chief executive believes that this can be handled with 5 officers, and we've got an opportunity here to make a saving, as one of the posts is currently vacant and the other one is coming to an end in December. So the decision has been taken in the corporate interest to try and make that saving.
Okay, next item. Sorry, that's my place here. Page 44, RG 22. Sorry,
Oh,
Graham.
Chairman, I think we've just come to the end of the savings. Is that not? Yeah. So just before we move on to the growth, just to remind ourselves of one of the key purposes for our scrutiny is, of course, to understand and challenge, but also it's about provoking new ideas. Can we think bigger, broader? Does it trigger other ways, other thinking in terms of how we can cut our cloth, going back to the fundamental purpose of we've got to create a balanced budget. So whether that's now, I know there were a couple of ideas came forward, but it's really that creation. What does this stimulate in further in terms of, can we go further? Can we go broader? Or are there other ideas that we can bring to the table? Because obviously that's a key objective of the process. I don't know if anyone has any ideas.
Pauline.
I don't know what the costs are, and it may be relatively trivial, but how about increasing our advertising income in the borough news and things so that all those things are cost neutral? How about putting advertising in with the council tax bills that get sent out? All sorts of things like that to try and actually generate some income. Also, we're doing a lot of roadworks. We always do a lot of roadworks. How about advertising as part of the things that we're building, charging for when we've got temporary billboards, charging for advertising on that? There must be ways we can generate more money. I don't know whether the budget in highways has still got the electronic signs on it for congestion. It may not have. One of the theories about those was you could actually put advertising on those as well. But that sort of thing. Any ideas in that way? Also, I don't know whether we're allowed to, but could we extend our waste collection service to doing commercial waste and charge for it?
Richard?
So I think probably, yeah, I think absolutely spot on, Paul. And I don't think it's about actually exploring the option now. We'll take all the ideas. We're very grateful of them. And then we'll look to see what options, but we don't want to go in and come back. No, this is in the spirit of any further ideas, are there any, has it triggered, stimulated any thoughts in anyone else in terms of why aren't you doing this, or should you consider this?
Microphone.
Apologies. You mentioned this many times before that 80% of the budget is the statutory children's care and adult social care, but do we not look into that box in detail? Can we not, I mean, obviously not today, but those boxes need to be looked into clearly.
You will do. They're on the schedule.
Sorry, just for clarity, the statutory also goes outside of the care services, so place and growth, waste collection. Yeah.
David. Then Pauline.
I think Pauline's point about revenue generation from other ideas, from other enterprises is an interesting one. When you get into a bit of a cultural clash, because you hear people then say, oh, well, what are the council doing running a little cafe or something else like that? I do think that if we are going to go down that route, and I personally would love to go down that route of generating income which we can reinvest back into the borough, it requires a kind of a business mindset, both within the council, but also the ability to explain to other people outside that actually, yes, we do have a role to play in generating income. We're not ashamed of doing that. I know I believe that we're statutory, we're not allowed to do it on things like transport and buses, from what I understand. Am I right in saying that, Paul, that you can't introduce new bus services at a profit? Am I wrong in that?
Introducing a bus service, we'd have to get an operator to bring that bus service in. We would then need to bring funding in for that to operate.
But the days of a council running its own bus services, and I understood from the legislation back to the 80s,
no,
you couldn't do it.
No, the Transport Act of 1984, I think, paid to that.
Pauline.
So picking up David's point about needing a different commercial mindset from maybe what we've got in the council, have you again thought of some sort of no win, no fee percentage agreement with somebody that could actually generate income for you, take 10% and give you the rest, for example? I've done that with things in the past. You know, that way you protect yourself from a bill, but you might get some benefit out of it and you can't lose anything really, I don't think.
So well, if we've got ideas, can I just rewind back to the pack so we can just get through the pack? Because I think what we've just gone through is a little bit of throw stuff out to people and not actually get through the details here. So yeah, page 44, R22, that's sort of been covered. Page 45, R23.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
Adrian.
Yeah, so this service was originally billed, and I remember the presentation. The guys presenting said the current staffing was 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and nobody logs ASB complaints at 9 o'clock on a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever. So actually the timing of the service was completely inappropriate. And actual ASB service should be focused around the weekends and Thursday nights and Friday nights. And I remember a lot of people in the council chamber nodding and agreeing that when people are drunk and coming out of pubs at Thursday night or Friday night, this is typical ASB behaviour. Now this document is saying we need more money when they said they didn't need more money. It's saying we need more staff when they said they didn't need more staff. This document is saying we need to now cover 24/7, 7-day-a-week rota when they said in their presentation there was no point in covering certain hours in the day like Monday mornings and Tuesday mornings. So I really don't see why we should spend any of this money.
It's also linked with the special item R28. And I think it certainly can be looked at again, but it will result in a reduction of the service.
I thought, you know, one of the consequences of reducing your budget is reducing your service. That's the purpose of this meeting, I believe.
Excuse me, can I come in, Chair?
Yes, you can. Go, Fran.
Thank you. So the growth that we're asking for here relates to a special item that we obtained last year. So last year we had 300k special item. And because that's only provided for a year, we're effectively asking for the special item again to continue with the 7-day-a-week service. I am not sure with regards to what you're saying about a 5-day-a-week service and Monday, you know, calls on Mondays and Tuesdays, etc. But we've been since the start working 7-day a week, and that has been really successful so far. All the feedback that we've been getting from residents, members, external stakeholders, etc., has suggested that the service that's being provided at the minute has been really valuable. So the intention is to continue as we are, and in order to continue as we are, we need that growth and special item in this pack.
So there's a question there with the ASB that actually deals with fly tipping and other associated things. So it's not just people rolling out of a pub having a jolly time.
Yes, absolutely. They deal with a whole host of things, fly tipping included, you know, checking on vulnerable residents, you know, anything that comes in which can't be assigned to any other service. It's not specific enough for another service, they get involved in.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Adrian?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see the numbers, bearing in mind they billed their service as not having the same hours as the previous service, which they regarded as pointless, which was Monday mornings and Tuesday mornings, which is what they said in their presentation, which I'm quite annoyed that this is different. I would be quite interested to see the KPIs for the number of ASB incidents raised on Tuesday mornings and Monday mornings.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, sorry, Fran, the team did come to Scrutiny some months ago, which you weren't present at. So what we can do is actually send you the details of that discussion. So it was discussed. Okay. Right, so Pauline, sorry.
Just in the spirit of trying to find more money, has anybody tried to get anything out of the police for this, seeing as we're doing their job for them?
Can I comment on that, Chair?
Yes, you can. Sorry, Fran.
Yeah, sorry, it's hard on teams being able to see who's doing what. So we engage heavily with the police. What we have to be clear about is the fact that we're not doing the police's role in what we're doing, and that's something that's really important for the team. You know, we don't have the same powers as the police. So you know, where something comes in that is the responsibility of police, you know, that gets referred on to them. So you know, we wouldn't be able to seek any funding from the police to carry out their responsibility because we're not carrying out their responsibility.
Sorry, Fran, you've got the same powers as a PCSO. So I do think it's worth trying to go around this loop again. I know it's probably going to be a hard push, but we are definitely doing stuff that the police would do if we didn't have to, or rather would not do, and would then get blamed for not doing. It really annoys me that lots of agencies are dumping their lower value stuff on us to do when we're in a financial problem.
Thanks, Pauline. Yeah, we can certainly liaise with the police further, but you know, we are in close discussion with them already about the work that we do, and you know, we've not been successful so far in getting any funding from them, but we can certainly look at it.
Al.
Yeah, I mean, following on what Pauline says, I mean, we had a presentation from Trading Standards, and they seem to also be doing a whole lot of work that the police should be doing. And when you see the size of the increase of the police precept last year, you wonder what they do with all the money compared to early town council, you know.
Shirley.
I was going to say, probably a bit tongue in cheek, but perhaps we should withhold the money we send to the PCC. We've got a very big staff. He earns quite a reasonable salary, but he's got about 25 people working for him. So maybe that's what we should do. Can we as a council withhold that and say, can we opt out of the money we give to the PCC? Is that a good saving?
All ideas are welcome. Obviously, some are more legal than others.
Okay. Moving on.
This is becoming like Passport to Pimlico.
Moving on. We're on page 46 RG24, waste and recycling.
This item is, I believe, now redundant because the work since this first cut was made has removed the need for that growth. So just rerouting, basically recasting routes.
Okay, thank you.
So waste and recycling increasing in property numbers, this is that one, that's no longer on here.
That's right.
Oh, right, oh, good. I was going to ask why that didn't come, sorry, I was going to ask why that didn't come out of SIL.
Yep, but it's gone, so.
It's gone. It seemed to be an infrastructure.
Right, okay, moving on. Page 47, RG25.
Yeah, that one I covered earlier with R11 and R25 and R31.
Yep, so that's
come together.
Yep. Moving on to page 48, R26.
Yeah, so this is inflation for local bus services. You'll see actually on the third block down, supporting evidence bit, it says 433,000. Officers have done some further work, and the 349,500 rounded to 350 is the correct number.
Pauline.
Again, in the spirit of cost saving, is there any opportunity to get this out of section 106?
Section 106 is limited, so we need to put this into the budget because there is not really sufficient monies around for 106 because there's other works that's tied to.
So following on from that, if you can't get out of section 106, we're paying some of the parish councils rather a lot of SIL at the moment. Could we get them to help?
Town and parish councils have got their own workload. It's something which we can be asking them for. Whether or not we get it is another matter, but it's something that we can certainly work on.
Thank you. You should have a reasonable lever. They want the services. Worth a conversation.
It's worth a conversation, yes.
Adrian, you said something?
Yeah, just a quick question on this one, Paul. So if a miracle happens and these buses get really busy, do we get any ticket income to offset this?
What effectively happens is if a miracle does happen and we get lots and lots of people starting to use these services, we then don't need to start putting more and more money in. So our support starts to go down. The problem we have is there's inflationary costs on these services. So that's why this bit is put in there. So this links to the item which went to the 29th of September's executive on tendering of the local bus services for Wokingham Town, the Woodley 9A, 9B and C, the Arborfield nighttime one, Leopard 3 and south of M4 services.
Okay, moving on to page 49, we've done already. Page 50, RG28, we've done already because that's just a duplication of RG23. So RG29, we've done, that's page 51. We've done page 52. So we're now on to page 53, but we've done that one as well because that's a balancing charge. Moving on to page 54. So RG32, page 54.
Yeah, so this is really linking in. It's replacement of the route-wise system, and it's really for the applications of home to school transport, and it's to make things much more efficient.
Adrian.
Is this kind of a routing algorithm for the children, or is that what it is?
No, it's for officers who are working at Wokingham Borough. It's bringing it's an IT bit of equipment. Okay, so it's to bring all the applications in and everything is work more efficiently.
In cost saving mode again, could we incorporate the cost of this into the cost of the home to school transport? And charge it?
Certainly look at that, yeah.
Okay, we've kind of covered R33 on page 55. And we've done page 56. That brings us to new capital templates. I don't know whether you want to talk about those or not, because I have no knowledge about them.
Okay,
Sorry, David.
But the question I was going to ask was, in having rolled through all these capital propositions, unlike on the revenue ones, with capital as an opportunity cost, isn't there? Because you do these and therefore you aren't spending the money on the other things. And in reviewing it, I would have found it helpful to know which capital projects were put aside in favour of the ones that we are bringing forward. Because then at least you get some idea in the spirit of where's the best place to spend the money. It might be easy to get a sense of how valuable these ones are. That makes sense.
Yes, Chairman. It depends how you want to play it. Obviously, here is on pages. Is it? Oh no, page 20 in the 20 in the book. So it's 20, 21, 22. So and of course we could take the approach of year one is the most important to focus on, because that's the capital programme we have to set at council in February. And really these are put forward in the spirit of we have to save £14 million, and we also have views on what are the most pressing capital priorities, and to kind of seek views in that regard. Now, behind some of these will be a complexity of funding, whether they're borrowing, whether they're 106 or, and of course, we couldn't give you that detail, but I think it was more of a kind of, here's the capital programme being proposed. Do you have any particular views? Obviously, adding things in is more problematic than looking to challenge the necessity of things, I would say.
Pauline.
Bearing in mind, although there is a bit of flexibility, 106 has to be spent on the category that it's identified as. Would it be worth on each sheet you just telling us whether it's largely 106 or not? Because if it's largely 106 and it's paying for roads, then we can't spend it on anything other than roads. We might choose different roads, but it's still roads. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, could I just ask about the early station footbridge? Is that is that going to be a new build or repair, or going to be put back?
That is currently being assessed. The structure which goes across the A3290 has some residual life left in it. The bit that is structurally, I won't say unsound, but has only several years life left in it, is the ramps at either end. The cost of construction has risen dramatically because of inflation, and particularly because of steel. So at the moment, there's some work going on to see what costs would be associated with replacing the ramps and making do and repairing the structure which goes across the A3290. So the bridge will remain in the same location it currently is in.
Well, so I was looking for a pointer from you guys of how you want to actually present these capital bids, because we could go through them one at a time, but it's
So, sorry, Chair. So I know, Stephen, but my pointer was really by exception. I mean, it's getting quite late anyway. We're probably running out of energy, but it's really what do people are people most interested in needing to understand? What do they have a strong opinion about? That type of thing, rather than running through each.
Right, Pauline.
Just for my sanity, could we flick through them one at a time, but only talk about the ones that are interesting, if you know what I mean? Because if they're 106 or grant funded, there's no point in talking about them really. We can have a discussion about what we're going to do, but it's not the same as whether we're going to spend the money.
Yep, that's fair. We'll just go through them serially, and then if there's nothing there, we'll just skip it. Okay, so first one.
So the escape contract is mainly 106. It's associated with the SDLs. It's building of new roads. We're tied to it.
Okay.
The next one down is haven't got anything on there.
C2, page 59.
What is that?
It's the depot.
Yeah. Tapley depot modernisation, something that we have to do health and safety wise. It is not good whatsoever. We've looked at a particular scheme to go ahead with that, and work is hopefully due to start in February next year.
Okay, Pauline.
So that's been heavily challenged for the last 2 years. And it does seem rather a lot of money for a depot. I think it would be nice to look in the same way as you have at the footbridge, whether you could just do some form of refurbishment. I know the roof's a bit dodgy, but 13 million quid for a new depot for highways and a grit bin, although it's a big grit bin, does sound quite a lot of money.
It's not a total replacement of the depot. It's refurbishment plus new. The costs have risen dramatically.
It sounds quite a lot to me.
It's the lower end cost. We did look at options on it.
Stephen.
I've actually got the chance to speak, but I don't think I have yet.
Next one's down, California Crossroads, which is vast majority of that is section 106, tied to Crossroads, due to start in Easter next year.
Pauline.
Item.
Again, this one is an interesting one. How much flexibility have you got about what else you might spend that 106 on? Just a question.
The first thing is, Pauline, we need to build it. Once completed, then we can see if there's any savings left over. I think Champstead Parish Council is also putting in some money on that as well. And then it goes back into the pot of the Arborfield SDL for what we can negotiate on to do next, if there is anything left over.
Okay.
That was my choice. John, as a teacher of mine, used to say. This is the Bulldog Garage in Winnersh is a very good news story. It's a great example of investing to save, because it'll provide us with, we hope, 25 new temporary accommodation units. The more temporary accommodation we have available, the less we have to pay out in emergency accommodation, which is extremely expensive to the council. So this will actually save a lot of money in the long run. And the money to pay for this will be coming very largely from developer contributions for affordable housing. In lieu of providing the affordable housing on site, they make a commuted sum, and the commuted sums are going to be put into this. And the residual amount we're hoping will come from a Homes England grant.
Just a question there with regards to, because I know there is a large amount of money spent on the housing for temporary accommodation. I guess you've looked at all the other sites that are applicable, and looked at car parks which might be vacant?
We're looking all the time for potential sites, Pete, because you're absolutely right. The more temporary accommodation we have available, the more we can minimise the emergency accommodation bill, which is currently horrendous. We've got homelessness as a major problem. It's rising. Demand for accommodations increasing. We've got three categories of accommodation: the permanent, affordable or social rental housing, the temporary, and the emergency. And the emergency bill currently is very high, and we want to reduce it. It will save the council money. It also puts people in a much more stable environment, so it's good for them and it's good for us.
Pauline?
Does this come out of the HRA?
No, it'll come out of developer contributions plus Homes England grant.
Chairman,
Norman, sorry.
I was going to say, just to be helpful, on the capital bid templates, there is a section that shows the funding of the scheme. So it will say, I'm just looking at randomly, page 71, emergency active travel grant, section 106. So it gives you that detail. It's all right.
Thank you. Norman?
I was just really wondering about the timescales for this. What do you have in mind for this one?
Well, this is land owned by the council, which makes it a lot easier. And it became surplus in March 2022. So obviously, we now have most of the money assembled. We need the residual amount to be covered by Homes England grant. So as soon as we can do it, we will do it. I think the assumption is these might be modular units, which we could construct quite quickly.
Norman again.
Just to follow up on that, then, if we can get this in fairly quickly, then, I mean, it seems like it would lead to considerable savings. So should that then be appearing in the revenue budget? Would that help us with our 4 million gap in the revenue budget?
Well, the savings will actually be not on the revenue budget, but on HRA, I think. HRA, Housing Revenue Account, which is ring fenced, and we're not considering it here.
But the expenditure to build it can't come out of the HRA.
No, the expenditure to build it is coming out of developer contributions plus a grant from Homes England. The savings that will be made on the emergency accommodation budget, which comes out of HRA.
Okay, but it would be quite substantial by the.
Sorry,
it would be quite substantial by the.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah.
Well, in the packet says 500 grand a year saving potentially. So it's just a great news story. I think we should just move on. It's all good news.
Can I just clarify that none of it will come from our revenue account?
That is my understanding.
Right, okay.
Okay, moving on, page 65C6.
Yeah, this is the highway carriageway structural maintenance. So this is the resurfacing of roads. This comes in annually. Shall I move on, Chair?
No comments? No, moving on.
Sorry, what's the source of funding on this one? I can't see it.
It's not external.
Sorry?
Not external.
So it's what?
It's capital borrowing.
Capital borrowing, okay.
Unless otherwise identified, it's general borrowing requirement.
Okay, page 67C7.
Yeah, so this is the Wokingham Highway Investment Strategy. Again, this is looking after the highway on a needs basis, carriageways, footways, drainage, etc. This is external funded, and we've got this for the next couple of years yet. Next one down is the active travel and bus priority, which is taken from the original congestion charge, which went through executive on the 26th of July.
That's page 71. Sorry, it's just the previous one was long, so yeah, I lost my page number.
69 it is.
Oh yeah, yeah. My
C8.
Yeah.
Take for the congestion budget, yeah.
Sorry, Paul, quick question on the emergency active travel grant. Is that time limited?
It could be if it's active travel England's funding, they will give a time limit for that to be spent. The existing one for the Woodley Reading is in two parts. One part is for March next year, and then the second part is much further on. So we need to negotiate with them an extension on that first element.
Okay, so now we're on page 71, C9.
Yeah, this is local cycle and walking infrastructure plans. Again, this is really pulling in. I'd like really to pull all of these together: the active travel bus priority, cycle, the LC whip, and the Woking and Borough cycling network, because they all really are part of the same thing. So I'd really like to pull all of those together.
With that regards in terms of budgetary stuff, has there been some approach to, I don't know, Chris Boardman has been a advocate of this type of thing. Is there somebody outside of the government that would give money?
That's Active Travel England. Chris Boardman heads that particular group. If we are, the first thing we have to do is have a draft LC whip, which we're currently working on. An approved one is something they're looking for in the near future, which we hope to get early next year. And we can bid for funding when opportunities come up, but we have to have our schemes compliant with local transport LTN 120. They must be compliant with that, otherwise you will not get the funding. Active Travel England have also said they are now starting to look at authorities who are bidding to show experience of delivering to LTM 120. So we've got to be delivering, otherwise we're not going to get the money and others will.
Okay, Al.
Wasn't there talk of some funding from the Levelling Up funds?
There was, and we made a bid, and that was Charville to Twyford Station. The government haven't concluded yet. I think they've been busy on other things. But we made that bid back in July, and we're hopeful that we'll be successful. We had Matt Rodder supported us, as well as Theresa May, both MPs covering that particular patch, which is very helpful to have the MPs back you on that particular scheme.
So, sorry, Shirley, I'm just going to speak. There's a European availability for money. I just looked it up. It's a 2 billion euros that's available. No, it's European Cyclists Federation, so it's a slightly different thing. So.
We will look up any avenues for funding. And if there is something we can bid for and we've got a scheme which is ready to go, that is something which we will be doing. We do have another opportunity for an Active Travel England bid coming up at the end of December this year. So we're analysing the responses through the LC Whip currently. That's going to come to this committee in 29th of November, I'm right. And we'll indicate in there which one we're going to be bidding for as well.
Yeah, so as I say, it might be worthwhile just actually having a look at that. It just seems as though it's got a pile of money that would give you stuff. Pauline.
I just wondered if there were any plans to improve cycle parking in town centre, secure cycle parking, because that's certainly something that needs doing, even if you charge for it.
That certainly would be part of the LC Whip. So it's origin to destination, and the destination is somewhere just to park your bike. So secure bike parking is certainly something. I know Wokingham Town Council are putting in or put in some some secure bike lockers.
Yeah, so Wokingham starting a just for interest really to all members are putting in secure lockable lockers for your e-bikes, because that's going to be put in. Unfortunately, at the moment, the person who's going to be doing it's gone off to have a baby, so it's just delayed by a couple of weeks. So we should see something by the end of November. Stephen.
Just wanted to correct a mistake I made earlier on in responding to Norman. The saving would actually be on the general fund, not on the HRM. So that's doubly good news, one might say.
Sorry, Shirley, I missed you. Microphone.
The figures that are in here for the LC Whip, for example, the figures 1.6 million here. What you're saying is that we could get grant funding which would reduce that down, is what we're saying. So the worst case scenario is that we would have, the council would have to pay out 1.6 million. But how much of that so do you think you might get in grant? What is your aim realistically?
I'd like to get as much as possible. As much as possible.
Okay, I'll ask the question a different way. Other councils, what sort of type of money are they getting for doing a similar thing?
It very much depends on what they've got putting forward and how far they've got through their design and consultation, whether they've got the backing. We've had a meeting with DFT as well, and Active Travel England, and they are really looking at now, what have you delivered already to LTN 120? And that's one of the things they're really going to start homing down on. So authorities which have bid previously and now delivered, they're the ones that are going to be at the top of the pile. So we really do need to be delivering of what we've already got from them, and then moving forward. That's really what we've got to be doing.
Yeah, so you've got to get an LN 120 under your belt, basically.
Yeah.
And we help to get further funding.
We do have one, which is the Woodley to Reading Palmer Park.
Okay, we can look into this later. Okay, moving on to page 73, C10.
That's a continuation of the Greenways project, linking up the SDLs and with the town, and at the moment, review of the budget requirement is ongoing.
Pauline.
I know I might be clutching at straws. Would there be any cost savings in linking up the team that does cycleways with the team that does greenways and just having one team that does both? Because it's very confusing having some things greenways, some things cycleways, some things footpaths in two different departments. I'm just wondering if there's any synergies. You don't need to answer now, but it might be worth looking at.
I'll let Paul speak in a moment, but greenways, in a sense, was designed for a purpose in the middle of the last decade, and in a sense it's been overtaken by events, the need to be far more aggressive with moving people to cycling and walking. But
I know Andy is itching to come in, so I'll let him come in.
I was going to say, Pauline, the important factor, our teams worked very closely together on both LC WIP projects and the greenways. The key thing is making sure that the routes we choose for both those different projects are fit together and don't duplicate. And that's part of the thing we've been doing with reviewing the greenway routes at the moment. And we've been reviewing them in the light of the emerging LC WIP. So that's where I think the sort of synergies and efficiencies might occur.
Okay, any other questions on that? So that was the last item in this pack. Are there any other questions generically in terms of, oh, sorry, Paul, you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I just wanted to mention a couple of things here. The next one down was the electric vehicle charge points. 1.2 million. We were successful this year in getting an OLEV grant for that. That's what we'll be aiming for. We're delivering these charge points at no cost to this authority. Okay, so that's what we are really starting to push for on those. And if I could just go to the second one from the bottom, Denmark Street environmental improvement 791. That's something I would be looking to push back into potentially year 3. And that links with another one on the next page, which is, I did see it earlier. What was it on the next page? Oh, sorry, it's on the 3rd page, on page 3, right at the very top, Wokingham Town Centre regeneration. And again, that'd be pushed back to the same time to link in with the opening of the South Wokingham Distribution Road. So there'd be capacity on the network to enable the works to go on in the town centre.
What those works are, says environmental improvements. Is it just planting some trees or?
No. Denmark Street suffers from narrow and fairly poor footways, so it's enhancing those. And there's some other environmental improvements, which is similar to what was done in the town centre, but extending it out a bit further as a rough summary.
Stephen.
Thank you, Pete. I just wanted to reassure colleagues that the 2 items on this page under my name, the mandatory disabled facility grants, I'm sure you all know that comes from a government grant, so this isn't money we're spending ourselves, we're simply distributing. And the new self-build project, this extra amount of money is to pay for 13 affordable self-build properties on the Tapley East development. And the money for this will be coming from developer contributions, again, commuted sums on the provision of affordable housing on other sites.
Thank you, Shirley.
One more sort of slightly random question for Paul, if you don't mind. This new bid here, street lighting columns structural testing, and it just struck me as odd that would be a new bid, because I would have thought that street lighting column structural testing would be something that was an ongoing thing all the time.
Bear with me.
Sorry, page 2, 3rd one up from the bottom. Capital summary.
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yeah, that should.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, I can confirm if it does say that in the bid, Shelley, that's not true. It's a misprint because it isn't a new bid. It's been in there every year that I've been involved in highways. So it's something we
it's
do.
just in the capital summary, and I would have thought it would have been something that was It's just done automatically, as you've said.
It should be automatic. It's every other year we do the testing to make sure they're structurally sound.
Yeah, but you don't apply for a bid every
No,
few years.
no.
It's just.
I don't know where you're reading that from because
It's this capital summary here, is that?
Okay, just to stop that, Graham's going to, Graham's going to make a point.
Yeah, it's a misunderstanding here. Basically, there's two columns. One says a reprofile from 22-23, which it isn't, and therefore it can only be the next column, which is a new bid for 23-24. Even though there's been bids previously as part of a programme, what this is saying is this isn't money transported from 22-23. This is a genuine additional new bid in 23-24, and then it's bid again for in 24-25. So it's saying it's an additionality as opposed to a reprofiling from past years. That's right. So you get it every year, like a programme. And
It's a year off the year.
and two. So it's in every year. You see it's in MTFP new bid in year 1, year 2, and year 3.
It's not in year 2.
Am I looking at the wrong? Sorry, every other one. I beg your pardon. I was looking at the one.
Okay. So it's just.
But it is new.
That's just a formatting problem there then. So we've got 9 minutes official time in this meeting. We can vote to extend to 11 to bring forth any discussion that needs to be done. So does anybody, I'm getting lots of negative, it's Okay, so we've got 9 minutes to fill. From the officers and the executives here, the question is to you. Do you have anything to say to us that we could respond to?
Well, it's only to reiterate the key purpose of this, which is if there are further ideas for making savings based on what you've received and understood, or conversations you have outside this meeting, then please either let me know, Imogen know as the lead member of finance, so that we can bring it into, as we say, this key purpose of balancing our budget for next year. And also with the growth, if you either on the capital schemes that you're not convinced about, that why are we doing this now or what have you, or we've got better ideas, same with the growth. Really not sure about this. Obviously, we've gone through this. A lot of this has been a educative piece in terms of what they're about, but this isn't the end of it. Obviously, we'll then go through the others as well, and you'll see right the way across, there's no single simple solution for solving our financial plight. Therefore, treat this as an ongoing discussion. I'm really keen to receive any ideas you may have that helps us get to where we need to be. And we will have to get to a balanced budget. It's unlawful not to.
Thank you, Graham. Imogen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate on what Graham says, is that, whatever happens, we're going to have to find this extra 4 million. And, all the stuff that we've been through is already stuff that we've, it's been identified as where and what we are in terms of revenue and the capital as well. So we are going to have to find this 4 million, and it's a question of where. That's really kind of what I feel. I mean, I know we've had some comments on the growth bids, which is good. And I think that, obviously with our next one, which is, 3rd of November. Yeah, 3rd of November. A focus on the growth bids is quite important, in the areas of growth, because obviously we can't really afford any growth. And anything else that we can make savings from. Why is this in here? Why have we got this item here? That would be the best thing.
Thanks.
Stephen.
I just wanted to thank members of the committee for their really helpful suggestions and for their questions. And I also wanted to thank the officers who've been here this evening supporting executive members, not just for being here tonight, but for all the phenomenal amount of work they're doing to try and make sure we can get into the position we all want to be in. The word unprecedented gets used so often that it becomes a bit hackneyed. But, you know, this is, I think we can honestly say, more challenging than any other budget setting process, given the context. That's true for local authorities across the country, not just for Wokingham, but we are, as we all know, the least well funded. So it hits us very hard. So thank you very much to everyone involved.
Okay, anybody else in the room want to say anything? You all want to go? Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for your forbearance, and good night.